So hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto hates his teammates. Part 2. If you guys enjoy this, what if? Comment down below. And let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And also share this video with your friends. And check out the description. And check out my playlist. So let's start the video. Chapter 6. Shut your mouth. Another day of the second exam had passed. Squad 7 sat by a large pond and ate roasted fish by the campfire during nightfall. After staying with the unconscious members of Team 8 and Sakura until they recovered, they bid farewell upon Shikamaru's insistence. Shikamaru argued that staying with Team 7 would put his own team in more danger than necessary. Ino gave the Earth Scroll to them after explaining that they had both scrolls already. None of them knew whether that was a lie or not. Sakura hoped that her friend's team passed the second phase. She didn't want Ino to lose on account of helping her. Naruto had located the pond they were currently camped near and sent out Kage Bunshin to acquire firewood while he spent time talking to Sakura about what happened during the time he and Sasuke were unconscious. Sasuke insisted upon catching the fish himself, arguing that Naruto shouldn't overwork his chakra and that he needed to adjust to his Sharingan's new ability regardless. At the moment, they sat quietly lost in their own little worlds of thought. Each would occasionally take a bite of their fish. Sasuke reminisced about what happened only a few days ago. It already felt like a lifetime ago. All three still felt surreal about an S-rank criminal attacking them in a Chunin exam. If not for the events themselves, Sasuke would have considered that it had all been elaborate. Yet, the fully developed Sharingan certainly wasn't faked. Sasuke suddenly thought of something. Naruto broached Sasuke, causing Naruto to gaze at him. How come you haven't been testing out yours? Are you having trouble activating it? Naruto shook his head. He finished swallowing his fish before speaking. No, replied Naruto, I just don't want to use it. Sakura seemed to choke on her fish before she slowly chewed correctly and swallowed. Sasuke just stared at him expectantly. What? Questioned Sakura, giving him an odd look. Why not? Naruto, it gives you an unbelievable edge on the competition. Nobody will see it coming. We're talking about a legend that some people thought was a myth. You can't just not use it. It's a good thing to have, Naruto, added Sasuke. How can you not be happy about this? Even if it isn't divine, it's still a bloodline limit. Choosing not to use it would be a waste. Imagine all the great things that you can accomplish. We're taught from day one in the academy that shinobi should use their tools amidst danger, and that includes bloodline limits. Naruto sighed tiredly, closing his eyes in annoyance. He reopened them to focus on his friends. You two just don't understand, began Naruto demurely. Sasuke raised an eyebrow as Sakura folded her arms for an explanation. Yes, I have the eyes of the Messiah now, but that's not necessarily a good thing. I've hated all my life for having the Kyuubi sealed inside of me. If the demon child suddenly shows up with a legendary Rinnegan, then what will people think? They've hated me for 6 years and they think I'm the demon itself. If I reveal that I have the Rinnegan, then who knows what most of them will do. I bet most will think that the demon spawn has perverted the religion somehow. Most of them don't even think I have a soul. I'd rather not place myself or any of you into any unnecessary danger. It's best that I keep it a secret. You're being a coward, said Sasuke plainly. He looked Naruto squarely in the eyes as he said that, and you're smart enough to know that. Naruto, you can't just give in to fear. Giving in to fear ruins people. Not using your bloodline is a waste of potential. Naruto opened his mouth to speak in protest. His eyebrows had furrowed in a scowl. Sasuke gazed at him unfazed. Naruto, interrupting Sakura a bit hesitant, Naruto closed his mouth and looked at her. He waited patiently as she gathered her thoughts so she could say what she wanted just right. You shouldn't let bias affect you this badly. That's not healthy at all. Sasuke and you both suffered terrible childhoods because of people's biases. What? Said Naruto, confused by that statement. He had certainly suffered from people's prejudice, but how had Sasuke? What do you mean? Give me a minute. Said Sakura, brainstorming the best way to articulate a reply. The other two waited patiently. Okay, you know how Sasuke's goal is to kill his brother. Well, after getting to know both of you more, I eventually realized that your backgrounds really cut deeply, but in entirely different ways. With you, Sasuke, it isn't just vengeance for your clan. It's a pride issue too. While your brother brought shame to the clan, in his own way, Itachi brought pride as well. He single-handedly killed an entire clan. He was argued to be the strongest Uchiha of our time because of his service record before he betrayed the village. How he ended up betraying Konoha reaffirmed that. People today compare Itachi to legends like Uchiha Madara and bring up similarities in their betrayal stories. Sasuke feels that he has to surpass Itachi's accomplishments, surpass the perceived expectations that his father had by constantly comparing his two sons, and fulfill the expectations that the people of Konoha have for him too. It's a lot to demand from him at such a young age. And alternatively you, Naruto, continued Sakura, have the exact opposite problem. People don't expect anything but failure from you. You let fear rule you too much. It's become obvious to everyone who knows you well that you. Naruto held up a hand. Sakura stopped speaking and gave him a stern look. Look, I understand what you both mean, said Naruto. Finally, I've been hearing it for a long time now from Haku too. I'd rather not get into an argument about this. I'll use my Rinnegan under emergency situations only. Obviously, I'll use it during training sessions so I can learn how to use it properly. Other than that, I don't intend to use it at all. I don't want to go flaunting to the village that I have a bloodline. I'd rather not actively try to make them hate me. Sasuke rubbed the bridge of his nose in annoyance as Sakura sighed in exasperation. Sakura started eating her fish quietly. Sasuke just glanced at his fish in mild annoyance. Both refused to gaze in Naruto's direction. Naruto felt the air of disappointment surrounding him. He stubbornly took a bite of his fish in an effort to ignore the tension. Your choice, mumbled Sasuke, shrugging and taking a bite of his own fish. The subject was dropped. For now. What Naruto held back on saying was that he privately didn't want to admit that the demon within him was right. The next morning Team 7 headed towards the tower for the next portion of the Chunin exams. They kept at a rapid pace to avoid other teams. The journey was quick and easy for them thanks to Sasuke's fully developed Sharingan and Naruto's chakra sensing ability. Once they had entered the tower, they unfurled the two scrolls in the designated location on the summoning ritual. Sasuke and Naruto stepped back as smoke began to filter from the summoning and a soft popping sound could be heard. The smoke receded to reveal Iruka. Congratulations, said Iruka smiling at the three of them, you've passed the second exam with a whole day to spare. You all can go rest up in the sleeping quarters if you need it. If any of you are injured then we have an infirmary within the tower to help any who need treatment. As your former academy sensei, let me just say that it was a pleasure to serve you three as my students. I'm honored and humbled by the fact that the three of you have come so far in military training. I admit, I was very skeptical about fresh out of the academy genins being sent to take the harsh Chunin exams, in which survival and murder is common. I owe you three and the others of the academy an apology. I was blessed because I still viewed all of you as children instead of soldiers. Iruka-san, you don't have to apologize, said Naruto smiling with a bit of pride at Iruka's words, it's normal for a teacher to see his students as kids. Yeah, Iruka-sensei, said Sakura, agreeing, it's only normal. It's not like we gave you reason to see us as adults. Ino and I always acted stupid about Sasuke. Kiba's antics were annoying, and the angsty boy over here wasn't any better with his holier-than-thou attitude. Sakura had emphasized her point by dipping her head in Sasuke's direction. Sasuke scowled, snorted, and folded his arms defiantly. Iruka noticed the boy's lips moving subtly upwards to betray the fact that he was amused by Sakura's comment. Iruka smiled upon seeing that all three seemed to have matured since the last time he saw them interact at the Hokage's office. Team 7 went to rest within the sleeping quarters for the day. At night, Sasuke and Naruto were shaken awake by a very proud-looking Kakashi. Yo, said Kakashi with his patented greeting, congratulations on passing the second exam. I would have woken Sakura too, but I can tell she needs her sleep. Naruto and Sasuke shared a smile at the praise. Pride surged through them both at the recognition of their accomplishment. Anyway, I've been sent to inform you of three of the rules, well the second exam is still in session, and to ask if you noticed anything unusual or suspicious during the second exam. You mean like the legendary Snake Sannin nearly killing us? Replied Sasuke sarcastically, yeah, it was hard to miss when we were fighting for our lives. Kakashi snapped into attention. His body straightened and his face became more serious. Tell me everything. He demanded. His tone made it clear that there would be no room for sarcastic comebacks or arguments. Sasuke and Naruto launched into explanations at different points. Sasuke explained most of what transpired when facing Orochimaru, since he had been conscious for the majority of it. Naruto filled in the little details that he could and explained Sakura's parts of the story. Sakura had informed him of what transpired in further detail during the campfire, while Sasuke had been catching fish. Kakashi stayed silent for a few moments as he mulled over the fantastic story that he was just told. His face had remained neutral throughout most of the explanation. His eyes had widened during certain parts of the story concerning the Kyuubi using the Rinnegan, but otherwise he didn't give away his feelings. May I see the Rinnegan, Naruto? Asked Kakashi patiently. It's not that I don't believe you, but if I report that I've seen your Rinnegan for myself, then it'll be a better confirmation for the story given. This way, it'll legitimize the report since it's more plausible that an S-rank Nukenin put you 3 under for some nefarious purpose. Naruto closed his eyes and reopened them to show the Rinnegan. Kakashi couldn't help but stare in mute surprise for a few seconds. It wasn't every day that the eyes of God were directed at you. Kakashi pushed his headband up and checked the chakra of both his male students with his Sharingan. His gaze shifted toward Sakura's direction and he noticed no foreign substance within any of their chakra. He covered his Sharingan eye once more. You may deactivate it, Naruto. Let Sakura know what I'm about to tell you now. All 3 of you have performed well beyond your call of duty as shinobi. I wish you all hadn't gone through such a horrifying ordeal, but you've performed amiably. Your show of teamwork in this exam is even greater now than when you faced Momochi's abuser. I'll notify the Hokage of the full details of your excursion with Orochimaru immediately. I'm sorry to say that you won't get to rest more under the circumstances because of the inter-village exam rules, but your incredible show of bravery and teamwork will go on record. Pride swelled within Naruto and Sasuke at the praise given by their sensei yet again. Kakashi went into further details explaining that they couldn't leave the tower because it would violate the exam rules, but that they were free to use the facilities if needed. Sasuke and Naruto went back to sleep in their respective beds as Kakashi went to give his mission report to the Hokage. After a proper meal within the cafeteria the following day, they stood with the other victors of the second exam. The Genin team from Sound had been the last to make it before the time limit expired for the day. They had just barely made it in less than 10 minutes and the 3 appeared to be thoroughly exhausted. Naruto observed the other teams that had managed to complete the second phase. The Jinchuriki from Sand was definitely the most dangerous to face in the preliminary exam. Naruto desired to face either someone from the Sound team or the Uzumaki team to pay them back for what happened to Sakura in the forest. He knew Sasuke felt the same way. Naruto was usually non-confrontational in his approach with people to avoid unnecessary violence, but what those 2 teams had done just begged for an ass-kicking. He wasn't going to pretend to be complacent considering what happened. On the top of the platform, where the Hokage spoke to the perspective, stood the senseis of the Genin teams that had made it. Curiously, the Sound Trio's sensei wasn't among them. Naruto could not spot anyone with a Sound headband. The Sand team sensei was there. Team Uzumaki's instructor stood amongst them as well. Uzumaki Kushina was clad in dark blue robes that were designed in a style similar to the Hokage. On the back of the formal and decorative outfit was a purplish Uzumaki swirl insignia. A mask of indifference was firmly on her visage as she peered below where the Genin stood. Her composure exuded an air of dignity and grace. Kushina was an attractive woman in her own right and her physical beauty put even Kurenai to shame. Naruto couldn't help but sneak glances in her direction. 6 years had passed since the last time he had seen his mother. When his cerulean blue eyes finally caught her steel blue, she didn't even spare him a second gaze. Naruto looked to the floor in self-loathing as he had noticed her face contorting in mild disgust before she continued her examination of the other Genin. Maybe if I reveal the Rinnegan in my fight, thought Naruto pitifully, Ka-san will acknowledge me. Maybe she'll want me back. The Rinnegan is legendary, so she is sure to. Despite this train of thought, Naruto was aware that he was just rationalizing the situation he was in. He couldn't know for sure what his mother would do. The clan had abandoned him for simply being a demon host, and it was entirely possible that they would see Naruto possessing the Rinnegan as sacrilegious to their beliefs. Naruto's gaze never left the floor as he sighed in depression, once the logical side of his brain overtook the glimmer of hope that he had. If he revealed the Rinnegan, then it was possible that instead of being seen as a failure in the eyes of the clan, he would be seen as an enemy and the worst smear on the clan name. After the finishing speech, the Genin were instructed to go onto the waiting platforms unless their name was called in the automated raffle. The names were randomized on the raffle board and the first 2 participants were chosen. After well-wishing from teammates, the 2 combatants began. Uchiha vs Uzumaki. Aku sat silently in the hospital room beside Karen. He sighed as he gazed at the still unconscious Uzumaki Karen on the hospital bed. 3 days had passed since he had brought both her and Mitarashi Anko to the hospital. In his haste, Haku had foolishly brought the summon within the bounds of the hospital, resulting in the doctors and nurses reacting in a panic. They had assumed that Orochimaru had come to attack the hospital and the Anbu were called immediately once one of them hit the alarm. It didn't help that Haku had the Kusanagi in his possession when he entered. Haku had to explain to the squad of Anbu the events that transpired in the Forest of Death so that they didn't shackle and throw him in prison for presumed treason. He had instantly ordered the snake to unsummon itself and had given the Anbu Kusanagi for inspection, but unfortunately the sword puffed out of existence the moment Haku handed the sword over. This confirmed that the sword was the authentic Kusanagi that was part of the snake summoning contract. Haku had learned too late that only those whom Manda, the ruler of the snake summons, or those a snake summoner deemed worthy, could wield the sword. This fact brought even more suspicion on Haku. Due to the length of time this diversion took, Anko was pronounced dead on arrival once the doctors inspected her. Karen had been hauled to the special ward that was designed for the treatment of shinobi from affluent bloodline families. The Hokage had come soon afterwards, as the Anbu wouldn't allow Haku to leave their presence until the Hokage made the final decision. Sarutobi had a grave expression on his face as he demanded that Haku explain what happened. Haku was quick to launch into an explanation of everything he could recall from the time Anko ordered them to search for Orochimaru to leaving the forest of death to rush them to the hospital. The Anbu hadn't believed the fanciful tale of a S-rank missing nin being beaten by a mere boy who had barely managed to rank as a jounin. The detail behind why Karen was unconscious increased their suspicion. He was now deemed a threat to the security of Konoha. Sarutobi had listened patiently. After his tale was finished, the Sandaime informed him that until Karen woke up, they couldn't verify the authenticity of his story, and he would be kept under surveillance by Anbu until Karen awoke from her coma. Haku had bowed his head respectfully and said that he understood. It was reasonable precautions given the circumstances. Haku was allowed to train and visit his teammate in the hospital, but he was allowed little else. He was indefinitely forbidden from the Uchiha district until Karen woke up, so he slept on the chair by Karen's bedside. The Anbu hadn't given him a place where he could sleep, and since he couldn't go back to the Uchiha district, there was nowhere else to go. Haku had no money on him and had solely relied on Sasuke's wealth for financial support since he was a newcomer in the village. Haku had left his possessions and what little money he did have within the Uchiha compound. He had planned to make an earning after the tests decided that his skills qualified for that position, but now he was at a loss. Haku couldn't really think of anything else to do. Even after the Chunin exams ended, the Hokage's authority superseded Sasuke's, so there could be nothing done for him until Uzumaki Karen woke up. He wasn't sure why he was even allowed to stay by her bedside if he was deemed a threat. Haku's intuition told him that the Hokage knew something about Karen's condition that he was keeping a secret. A few clansmen from the Uzumaki would come by once or twice a day to check up on her condition under orders from the clan head, but no one seemed to make a visit for personal reasons. He was just thankful that they opted not to bother with him, even if it was because he was suspected of being a spy for Orochimaru. Haku knew that they did not desire potential tools with bad reputations. Haku could feel killing intent periodically from some of his Anbu watchers. One Konoha was dead and another incapacitated under mysterious circumstances, after all. He attempted to ignore it as best as possible, but over the days it began to agitate him. He sorely hoped Karen would awake soon. If she died from what troubled her body, then the Anbu would surely persecute him on groundless implications that would seem all too reasonable to the public. "Well, I must say that I am quite pleased with this turn of events," said Ranmaru in satisfaction. He used his forearms to release two short-boned swords. "By defeating you, my clan shall prove that not only is my shinobi education on par with the academies, but that it is superior because I will have defeated the Rookie of the Year." "Glad to see that your clan thinks so highly of me," quipped Sasuke giving Ranmaru the classic Uchiha smirk. "I'll be sure to give you a good smackdown for what you did to my teammate." "Do not begrudge me for taking an opportunity that presented itself," replied Ranmaru with just as much vigor. "You should be proud of her. I am not ashamed to admit that I was careless at first and was nearly defeated due to a mistake. Of course, in the end, I prevailed as expected. Which is more than can be said about you. The Rookie of the Year was beaten and unconscious within the first day. It's rather shameful. Should we expect low-quality standards from all of those of the Konoha Academy? You are, after all, the representation of their finest." "We ran into some trouble," admitted Sasuke knowing that nobody would actually believe they fought an S-rank Nukenin and lived. Sasuke had to keep it a secret for security purposes regardless. "But we made it to the finals. That's the beginning and the end of it. Time to fight. I'd like to see you keep stroking your own ego after I've beaten you." Ranmaru lunged towards Sasuke. He held his right bone poised to strike as he attempted to stab Sasuke in the face. Sasuke closed his eyes, bent backwards to avoid the incoming stab, and brought his left foot upward to kick Ranmaru in the groin harshly. Ranmaru bit back a scream and backpedaled to avoid being hit while exposed. Sasuke moved back to an upright position to reveal his fully developed Sharingan. Ranmaru gaped in abject shock. He had been confident that he could defeat the Uchiha prodigy easily because the mission reports indicated that Uchiha Sasuke hadn't fully developed his Sharingan. Somehow, in less than a week and miraculously while he was unconscious, he had fully developed it. Uzumaki Kushina's lips thinned as she gazed upon this new development. Yakumo scrunched her face in mild annoyance, and Ide merely looked surprised like the other spectators. Sakura and Naruto exchanged smirks upon seeing the surprised reactions of the others. "My youthful rival," boasted Mito Guy, "to think that you had a training regime to accelerate your students' prowess to this level. Clearly, you are a worthy adversary." "Don't look at me," replied Kakashi mildly. "Sasuke attained that level of mastery himself. It wasn't my training that did it." Asuma and Kurenai looked in his direction in disbelief. They didn't buy it. The evidence just didn't match that explanation. Sasuke had only begun training as a genin a short while ago. "I hope you haven't been neglecting your other students in favor of your best one," said Kurenai bluntly with an edge in her voice. She gave Kakashi a scowl. "That sort of behavior could get you reprimanded once it's reported." Kakashi held down the irritation he felt at that comment. It was embarrassing to have your teaching methods questioned among both your peers and students. He felt a firm response was necessary toward this misplaced accusation. "The only student of mine that I've arguably given special training to is Naruto," said Kakashi curtly, "and that was because he already mastered rudimentary training sometime before becoming a genin." Idate openly snorted at that as Yakumo tried to stop her eyes from rolling. What fool would believe that? Considering the reprobate's performance record, thought Idate amused, it's clear the so-called special training entailed the rudimentary exercises. This jounin is full of it. The academy's public performance record speaks for itself. Ranmaru tried a flurry of thrust attacks to turn Sasuke into a human pincushion. Sasuke easily sidestepped, backed away, and bent away from these strikes. He grabbed Ranmaru's left wrist before using his right elbow to slam into the middle of the arm. Ranmaru cried out in pain. Sasuke backed his right fist and punched Ranmaru square in the face with all the physical force that he could muster. Sasuke had let go of Ranmaru's wrist just as he connected the punch. He sent Ranmaru careening to the floor. The Uzumaki's body continued to roll wildly on the ground before finally stopping the momentum near the stadium wall. "That was for what you did to Sakura," snarled Sasuke, "you pathetic bastard." "Yeah. Get him, Sasuke," roared Ino heartily. She was practically jumping up and down on the spectator area. "Fuck that G. Ino," admonished Asuma, feeling embarrassed that his pupil was about to use such language under the present company of his fellow peers and his father. "You must act like a respectable shinobi in this formal inter-village spectacle." Asuma was usually laid back, but he did not want to be blamed for his students' foul use of language. He would never hear the end of it from his old man. Ino couldn't be seen cursing amidst the foreigners of sand and sound, the Uzumaki clan leader who was also a close advisor of the fire daimyo, and in the presence of the Hokage himself. It just wouldn't be tolerated. Ino turned around and gazed up at her teacher before turning back around quickly to cup her hands in front of her face. She didn't care who she was embarrassing. The image of Sakura on the ground with harsh cuts in a pool of her own blood superseded any need for public courtesy in Ino's mind. "Beat the living shit out of him, Sasuke-kun," shouted Ino enthusiastically, "give him hell. The stupid fucker deserves it." "That's enough," snarled Asuma, he was losing his patience. "I will not tolerate you saying this." "You don't have to worry, Ino," said Sasuke, smirking, "it would be my pleasure to beat this miserable ass to a pulp." Sakura blushed at the extroverted enthusiasm of both her teammate and best friend, wanting vengeance for her sake. She felt a swell of happiness spread through her, despite the increased embarrassment of both of their antics. Naruto was trying to hide his snickering as he enjoyed watching Sasuke give the beatdown on the punk. Hinata rolled her eyes at the display of stupidity that Yamanaka was showing. Idate watched him passively, and Yakumo glared at the idiocy shown by the blonde weakling. "That is a deplorably unbecoming statement from the scion of the Uchiha clan, who spoke Uzumaki Kushina for the first time." She caught the attention of the other audience members. "You should be aware of your standing amongst peers and superiors, Uchiha-san. Partaking in such unruly discourse demonstrates your childishness. Please refrain from this petulant behavior in the presence of the foreign shinobi, the Hokage, and I consider what your parents would think of such a demeanor." Sasuke's eyes narrowed as he gazed directly at Uzumaki Kushina. That insult vexed Sasuke. It was entirely underhanded to mention the expectations of his dead parents as a way to persuade Sasuke to conform to her demands. Ranmaru came running toward him at full speed. Sasuke allowed Ranmaru to twirl in a slashing motion before maneuvering to Ranmaru's right side and tripping his footing. Ranmaru's eyes bulged at having what should have been an effective fighting strategy so easily exploited. The Sharingan was proving to be a formidable challenge. Sasuke cupped his hands together as he moved his shoulders to the right and then slammed his elbow on the back of Ranmaru's exposed neck. Ranmaru screeched in pain as he was sent flying face first to the wall at the other end of the stadium. There was a short boom sound as a giant dust cloud obscured Ranmaru from view. Sasuke's Sharingan simply rendered Ranmaru's fighting style obsolete. Sasuke was just as fast as Ranmaru, and his Sharingan instinctively pointed out the weaknesses that Sasuke could exploit at exactly the right moment. Nobody had expected Sasuke to gain the full powers of the Sharingan so early in his shinobi career. For all the Uzumaki clan's grooming, they couldn't have prepared Ranmaru for this. Sasuke looked back up to where Kushina was. He would show her for using his deceased parents to badmouth him. You have no right to speak of my family, spat Sasuke snappishly. Kushina's porcelain features began to feature a faint scowl at Sasuke's tone. You really think that you have the right to judge me? How about I start judging you then? You're a terrible mother and human being. The entire crowd seemed to stiffen at Sasuke's words. Kushina outright glared at Sasuke, as if daring him to say that again. Yakumo snarled at Sasuke as Idate merely gave him a contemptible gaze, as if to express Sasuke's accusations were underneath him. Naruto groaned and rubbed his head as he felt a headache coming along. He really didn't want Sasuke to ruin his own reputation for his sake. He appreciated Sasuke backing up his side, but Naruto didn't want this to be an issue. Kakashi didn't know if he should applaud or denounce it. On one hand, Sasuke was defending a teammate and on the other hand, he was vocally making an issue in a very self-righteous way. The rest of the spectators simply watched the drama unfold. Clearly, began Kushina darkly, you were too young to learn proper manners from your family. It is quite a shame that you've abandoned proper formal etiquette for this callow manner of speech. How? How the hell could you just abandon a 6-year-old child? Shouted back Sasuke angrily, family. The family is supposed to be there for each other. They're not supposed to just abandon a child and leave him to live alone in the streets off government stipends. You people are fucking heartless. That is enough, Uchiha. Shouted Kushina, her beautiful features now held a tinge of red with anger. I shall not have the decisions I make about my clan ridiculed by your juvenile behavior. What could you possibly understand about the pertinent decisions that I make? You are to apologize for this at once or else I shall have you reprimanded. I will seek damages through the Konoha Council if you continue this contemptuous behavior any further. Ranmaru jumped high with his bone swords held in reverse as he dove at Sasuke. Sasuke grabbed his right arm when Ranmaru was close enough and hurled him over his shoulder. He punched Ranmaru squarely in the gut when Ranmaru was upside down and in front of him. He had already let go of Ranmaru's right arm to see Ranmaru helplessly fly toward the stadium wall that he had nearly hit the first time. Ranmaru slammed into the wall with a dust cloud forming around the area he had impacted. I, Uchiha Sasuke, hereby reject any form of cooperation and camaraderie with the Uzumaki clan and henceforth demand proper restitution from my teammate Uzumaki Naruto until such a time that I find the redress to be satisfactory. Spoke Sasuke in a formal tone, the entire crowd started in open shock. If such measures have not been met then I shall regard your clan as an obstruction to the basic rights of all Konoha citizens. I shall see you as the enemy of the Uchiha clan. How dare you? Hollered Kushina loudly, you do not have the right to declare open hostility over the measure of treatment I deem sufficient within my own clan. Actually, I have plenty of right seeing as I was made the clan head as is my birthright, said Sasuke smirking, I judge by what I see and what I see disgusts me. You will regret this, Uchiha. Bit back Kushina, her anger was apparent to everyone in the stadium. Your delinquency will be shown in court and you shall apologize to me for such disrespectful and moronic provocations. Kushina proceeded to point a delicately manicured finger at Naruto. She kept her glare on Sasuke. All this for that worthless excuse for a shinobi. That boy is nothing but a failure in every regard. He has no bloodline, barely passed the shinobi academy, and is not only an embarrassment to the Uzumaki name, but a wretched sin to its very core. That is completely out of line. Shouted Sasuke, getting angrier, don't you dare insult my friend within my presence. Friend? Screeched Kushina staring at Sasuke in disgust, the Hokage looked ready to step in. You call him a friend that impurity is a shame. Do you not understand? He is a personal shame. I birthed that disgrace and had to endure for 6 years before I finally had enough. I washed my hands clean to help my family. I knew I was making the right choice too. That reprobate said he wanted to be Hokage. It was the same dream that the heathenish madman who killed the pious bloodline clans of Kurigakura had. It would have been the second coming of a demon. Enough. Bellowed the Hokage furiously, there is to be no more conversation for the remainder of this match from anybody. Anyone who breaks this decree shall be disqualified under my authority. Many of the genin appeared confused by Kushina's words, but wisely obeyed the Hokage's orders. Kushina simply glared at Sasuke. Sasuke decided to just focus on his opponent so he wouldn't retort. Idate and Yakumo smirked upon seeing their clan head get the last word in. Asuma, Kurenai, and Guy gave dark looks toward Kushina's direction. Ino looked at Kushina in repulsion, having understood some of the words she used to describe her own son. Hinata appeared mildly annoyed and would occasionally sneak glares in Kushina's direction. Sakura and Kakashi looked over at Naruto in concern. Naruto simply looked down at the floor hatefully. I knew it. Thought Naruto ruefully, I knew she didn't give a shit. So why do I always hope that she does? Why do I always put myself through it? I know what the result will be. Showing off a bloodline limit would just make her hate me more. Why couldn't she have just suffocated me when I was a baby? Why does it still hurt after all this time? Naruto's shoulders shook before he took a few deep breaths to suppress the tears that threatened to come out. He didn't want to embarrass himself in front of everyone here. That was the worst pain of all. Showing that the words got to him. Why did he still care about their approval? Ranmaru charged with a flurry of slashes, but Sasuke dropped down on the floor and brought his left foot up to slam into Ranmaru's chin, sending him high in the air. Sasuke jumped high in the air after him and kneed him in the back. Ranmaru roared in pain as Sasuke flipped his body forward to get above Ranmaru to stomp harshly on his stomach. Sasuke finished the tactical combo by twirling to his right to kick Ranmaru in the face and sending him spiraling to the floor. Ranmaru got up from the floor growling in anger. He spat the blood from his bleeding mouth. He briefly closed his eyes to inhale and exhale to calm himself. He reopened his eyes and threw his bone swords at Sasuke. Sasuke responded by throwing 2 quick kunai at the bones, rendering them useless. Ranmaru took the chance to unleash the bone spikes throughout his body. "Inagi no Mai," yelled Ranmaru, taking the offensive once more. He pulled out 2 bone swords from his forearms again. Ranmaru was closing the distance quicker than usual. It seemed he was desperate. Sasuke quickly put forth a tiger seal to the surprise of Ranmaru. "Pain. Ryuken no Jutsu," said Sasuke before breathing some air. Sasuke exhaled the dragon fire technique straight toward Ranmaru. Ranmaru bent backwards at the very last moment to allow the fiery technique to pass over him and burn away a chunk of the far wall. Sasuke released the technique and jumped high into the air. Ranmaru leapt into the air toward him ready to attack him with his defensive bone form. That way Sasuke couldn't counter without hurting himself and he wouldn't have the time to concentrate on the chakra required for a dot. Sasuke threw shuriken at Ranmaru which forced Ranmaru to use the Karamatsu no Mai spinning defense to deflect the shuriken away from him. Once he broke out of the spinning, Ranmaru was left unprepared for the dragon fire attack that blasted straight into him. Ranmaru wailed in agony as his body was set on fire and blown toward the statue of the far wall behind him, where it impacted and exploded in streams of smoke and fire. Ranmaru's body was still ablaze as it fell to the floor harshly. He rolled around on the floor for a few minutes to put the fire out. The fire eventually went out. His body finally stilled as he passed out from the pain of enduring a few third-degree burns on patches of his body. Participant Uzumaki Ranmaru is unable to battle. This match goes to Uchiha Sasuke. Called Hade, while trying to maintain his coughing, would the medical team please come forward? The medical team rushed forward onto the battleground to carefully place Ranmaru on the stretcher. Sasuke walked back up to the spectator box where he saw his team's congratulatory faces and Team Uzumaki's hateful glares. "Congratulations, Sasuke," said Sakura cheerfully, "I knew that he would be no match for you." "Way to kick his ass, Sasuke," said Ino walking into view, glad to see some justice was done. "Justice?" spat Ikumo listening in and walking over to them, "The Uchiha nearly killed Ranmaru. How is that justice?" "Nothing short of what that bastard deserved," countered Ino. She glared at Ikumo in disgust. "He tried to kill Sakura in the forest." "That was completely legal," replied Ikumo, getting angrier at the audacity of the blonde before her. "Don't tell me you're so stupid that you forgot about the death waiver that all of us genin here signed." "Ikumo, enough. Stop participating in their raving stupidity," bellowed Kushina appearing annoyed. "Get over here and do not say another word to that delinquent." Ikumo stayed for a bit to keep glaring at Ino before rushing back to her clan head's side. Ino glared right back even as Ikumo walked away. "I hope I get to beat her ass," muttered Ino before directing her attention back towards Squad 7, anyway. "Good job showing those psychos who's boss, Sasuke." "You did great, Sasuke," added Naruto stiffly. Sasuke looked back at Naruto apologetically. Naruto didn't know what to say. "Listen Naruto, I didn't mean for that display to happen," said Sasuke ruefully. "I shouldn't have put you in the middle like that. I can understand that you're mad. I just lost it. Considering how they treated you and what I feel family should be. I just lost it. That's no excuse though." "It's alright," said Naruto after thinking it over. "I can't say I wasn't entirely appreciative of you standing up for me. Although, there are better ways to do it." Sasuke chuckled at that. Kakashi smiled under his mask, seeing that the team spats were resolved easily without his interference. "You've trained your pupil well, Kakashi," said Kurenai, coming into view with Shino and Hinata. "It appears to me that Uchiha-sen was merely pointing out the truth," suggested Hinata, having heard their conversation. Kiba hadn't joined the rest of Squad 8 in walking towards Squad 7. Naruto noticed that Kiba had a particularly hateful gaze toward his team. Sakura followed Naruto's gaze and felt unnerved by Kiba's visage. Hinata took note and turned around to give Kiba a death glare of her own. Kiba quickly looked the other way to view the sand team. "The fool is looking at me," explained Hinata flatly. She turned back around to face them. "I made it evident that I didn't care or appreciate his idiotic gestures of affection after saving your team from nearly being killed. I wish to congratulate you, Ichiha-san. Your battle prowess clearly exceeds mine. I defeated that Uzumaki too, but not as easily as you." Sasuke nodded in thanks. The next match was announced on the electric board. Yamanaka Ino vs. Haruno Sakura. The two girls stared at each other in surprise before heading down to the battleground. Hayate raised his hand up and called for the match to begin. Sakura pulled her headband over her head in a traditional style and waited for Ino to attack. Ino, however, seemed distracted. They both waited for the other to make a move. Ino was torn. It shouldn't bother her, but after seeing Sakura in a bloody mess, she didn't feel good about fighting her friend. Fighting her meant potentially seeing that helpless and bleeding body again, except this time by Ino's direct actions. Ino had a hard time getting the image out of her mind. The memory was too fresh. Ino bit her lip in anger before exhaling and sighing aloud. She raised her hand up in the air. "I give up," said Ino decidedly. Sakura's eyebrows rose in surprise. Ino dropped her arm. "I'm sorry Sakura, but I just can't bring myself to fight you. This isn't out of pity. After nearly seeing you die. I honestly just can't do it." Sakura looked indignant. Ino gave a small shrug in apology. Sakura shook her head before heading back up the spectator box. Ino followed along from a distance. Hayate had already called the match in Sakura's favor. Ino walked toward her own team and ignored Team 7. "Well, I guess you won't be able to blame me if I just give up now," said Shikamaru pleased, "otherwise, you're a hypo." "Shut it, Shikamaru," said Ino tiredly. She didn't look at him as she made it back to Team 10's side. "I'm not in the mood for your idiocy." Shikamaru scowled at Ino. Choji quietly tried to keep out of it like usual. The next match to be called was Tsuchi-kin vs Nara Shikamaru. After Shikamaru's victory by using his family to slam Kin's head against the wall, the medics took her away and the next battle was called. The blonde sand shinobi defeated Tenten easily. The other jounin took note of the fact that Guy had failed to train Tenten in good taijutsu to deal with far-ranged attacks. The Hokage gave a stern gaze toward Guy after the battle. It didn't help that Hayate had to order Rock Lee to be stopped and threatened to disqualify him if he tried to attack the other competitors in such a wanton fashion again. Konoha wouldn't tolerate one of their own physically attacking foreigners of another nation over petty squabbles, such as wanting to get even for the defeat of a comrade. After that, the face-painted sand shinobi and the wind-using sound shinobi were next to battle. After a few attempts to destroy Kankuro with his wind blasts, Zaku finally landed a blow that appeared to rip Kankuro to pieces. Zaku's overconfidence cost him as Kankuro's real puppet erupted from the ground and slammed Zaku into the coffin-like trap. Zaku screamed his last breath as the coffin-like prison killed him from within. Kankuro released the hold the puppet had to show everyone the gruesome pincushion-like death of the sound shinobi. The sand team, the remaining sound shinobi, Team Uzumaki, and the adults in the room looked on impassively. The rest of the genin were either disturbed, closed their eyes, or looked away. Team 7 were only minimally affected, having seen dead bodies before. Hinata did not betray her emotions from the frigid visage she held. Ino appeared the most disturbed by this turn of events because it was a reminder of what nearly happened to Sakura. Shikamaru and Choji were more affected by this because it was far more gruesome than what they had observed of Sakura's dire straits back in the Forest of Death. The medics took the corpse away. Kankuro made his way back to his siblings. The next match was called Uzumaki vs Uzumaki. Chapter 7. Tekken. Ikumo smirked as she walked down the stairs toward the battleground. She was pleased with being able to fight the failure of the Uzumaki clan. She would not only be able to showcase the great talents of the Uzumaki clan, but kill the black sheep of the clan too. It was a literal version of killing two birds with one stone. Naruto kept his demeanor reserved. After nearly embarrassing himself earlier, he desired to keep his emotions in check. He didn't want to reveal that his mother's words had an impact on him. He put his focus on the opponent in front of him. He scowled as he noticed her haughty smirk. Naruto quietly breathed in and out to try and abate his anger. It has been getting harder to keep in check with his so-called family insulting or attempting to kill him at every instance. Naruto was struggling with his own emotions in the situation. He was both deeply depressed over his mother's words and infuriated by them. It wasn't a stretch of the imagination to say that Naruto had thought of torturing his family. But that's wrong, thought Naruto, trying to rein in his overflowing emotions. I can't think like that. I won't prove that I'm the demon that they accuse me of being. I'm not like Yujiro Yagura. I'll ignore them. It's the right action to take and it proves that I'm the stronger person. This match is like a gift, said Yakumo, sneering. Not only will I prove myself to be a capable chunin to the examiners, I'll be able to uphold the dignity of the clan. The Uchiha had defeated Ranmaru, but nobody expected the Uchiha to have mastered his bloodline limit so early. It isn't much of a shame to have lost to the last of a noble bloodline. You, however, have no chance against me. Do yourself a favor and humbly admit defeat. Be grateful I'm being lenient because Ide-kun would not be. The onlookers stayed quiet and simply watched the match. After the Hokage's disapproving decree in Sasuke and Ranmaru's match and the bloody mess from the match between Kankuro and Zaku, none of the genin could muster enough curiosity or nerve to speak on the match yet. They didn't have to enforce discipline or drag themselves into conversation for that reason. "Are you going to talk or are you going to fight?" said Naruto resolutely. "I don't care about what you think." Naruto proceeded to run toward Yakumo at an accelerated pace, pulled his fist back, and punched her in the face. Naruto reared back his hand in pain. Yakumo took advantage of Naruto's surprise by bending her knees, moving her left leg in a stomping motion in front of her, and delivering a painful blow to Naruto's sternum with a powerful left-hand strike. He looked toward Yakumo in confusion as he was sent flying backward and landed harshly on the dusty floor on the other end of the battleground. Naruto slowly got up as he gingerly rubbed the area that was now throbbing in pain. He threw 2 quick shuriken at Yakumo. The shuriken struck Yakumo in the face, only to have their motion stopped after bouncing off her skin. The shuriken wore off to reveal explosive seals. Yakumo's eyes widened in momentary surprise before the seals exploded. Once the dust was settled, Yakumo was revealed to be completely unharmed. An arrogant smirk was plastered on her visage. Hoten murmured to Naruto, the fact she was unharmed confirmed that she had the steel bloodline, my taijutsu offense is useless. The steel bloodline was one of the best abilities for high-powered taijutsu combat. Earth ninjutsu was mostly useless against a bloodline because the defense of a steel body user was far greater than the attack power of shinobi, who incorporated earth ninjutsu into their taijutsu. The very skin of a steel body user changed to the composition of black steel. Black steel was one of the toughest metals to exist in the shinobi world. Some touted that the steel bloodline was the ultimate shield. It protected the user from many damaging techniques and made hand-to-hand combat virtually useless. If it had been the Hyuga who was facing a steel bloodline user, then in most cases the Hyuga would likely lose because the traditional gentle fist was rendered obsolete against black steel skin. Naruto briefly mused over using the Rinnegan's gravity techniques to swiftly defeat Yakumo. He would be able to blast Yakumo at far distances and use her own strength against her with gravity. Naruto decided against it. He had promised himself to only use it in emergency situations, and if he beat Yakumo without using his bloodline, then he could use it as a trump card for the actual Chunin exams tournament. "I tried to be nice," said Yakumo. She glared at Naruto in disdain. "None of your equipment will work against me." This match was over the moment it was announced. Yakumo ran toward Naruto at a rapid pace. Her intent was to kill Naruto by transforming her right arm into its black steel form and punching through his stomach. He would bleed out, eventually succumb to death, and Yakumo would legally get away with the murder because of the inter-village laws. She had explicitly made sure not to shout out her intentions of murdering Naruto so that the Uzumaki clan didn't run into bureaucratic trouble for the purposeful murder of another participant. Once Yakumo was close enough, Naruto bent backwards as he breathed inward before pushing his body back up and exhaling the Katen. Ryuka no technique. It didn't go unnoticed that he had used this without any hand seals. Yakumo was caught off guard as the dragon fire blazed through her. Her body was pushed in the opposite direction before the fire fully receded to reveal Yakumo had instinctively protected herself by activating her bloodline. Her skin had fully changed to a dark bluish color. An enraged visage was marrying her features. The spectators could see that some of her kimono had been charred. Yakumo jumped high into the air toward Naruto. Her vengeful appearance said it all. She aimed to kill him. Yakumo brought her right hand back as she slammed it toward where Naruto was. Yakumo's attack created a small crater when she finally landed. She rose up from the floor and looked around for her prey. She used her hereditary Uzumaki chakra sensing ability, but shockingly couldn't find a trace of him. "Examiner," spoke Yakumo softly, she relaxed her posture. "My opponent has cowardly fled from this fight. Submit this match in my favor. It's against the rules to leave the Chunin Tower during the examination period." Hayate hesitated as he tried to futilely search for Naruto's chakra. The Hokage was watching and wanted to make sure that he was being fair to Naruto. Hayate was aware the Uzumaki sensing ability was greater than the usual shinobi's. Hayate almost looked pleadingly up to the Hokage before straightening his posture. He needed to be the one to make the decisions in this exam. After a few minutes of agitation, Hayate finally decided to call it in since Naruto clearly wasn't in the area. The spectators had mixed reactions. Team 7 seemed relaxed, and Sasuke seemed to almost be smiling. Kurenai actually shared Team 7's calmness. Shikamaru, Chaoji, Shino, Hinata, and Team Guy looked on impassively. Ino seemed to be cursing under her breath, wondering why Naruto wasn't showing up. Asuma gazed sternly at Kakashi, wondering how poor of a teacher the man was. Diba hollered about starting the next match because the one in the battleground was clearly over. The Sound Shinobi, Team Uzumaki, and the older siblings of the Sand team silently agreed with the harping mutt. The Jinchuriki of the Sand kept his eyes on the battleground. Participe. The 8 statement was cut off when a giant fireball smashed the back of Yakumo and sent her skidding forward before she fell face first onto the floor. The attention of the audience was instantly drawn back into the fight. All complaints vanished. "I never left," stated Naruto matter-of-factly. He appeared a few distances behind her. "I just know how to evade your sensing ability with my movements. It's not difficult to understand the flaws of an ability that I have too. I knew giving you a false sense of security would work." Yakumo got up as she spit dirt out of her mouth and wiped the remaining dirt off her lips. She turned around, letting out an angry growl. Yakumo ran forward before jumping into the air. Yakumo gave a fierce twirling kick to try and strike at Naruto's midsection. Naruto had agilely ducked out of the way before the trajectory of the kick could strike him. Yakumo followed up with a downward haymaker only to make a small fist-like crater on the floor. Naruto was now standing a few feet away from her. The attack had missed completely. Naruto had back-flipped out of harm's way before the strike could connect. "Damn you," snarled Yakumo, enraged. She couldn't even lay a finger on him. "You can't possibly be that fast. This must be some sort of trick. I'm as fast as Ranmaru." Naruto didn't answer her. It would be stupid to reveal your technique to your opponent, especially when it was working out so well. The simple fact was Naruto's speed was one of the fastest amongst the genin. Naruto had mastered the Shunshin no and incorporated the technique with his taijutsu. It gave him a considerable edge against the competition, since very few could incorporate the Shunshin no in this manner. Naruto mastering the technique to the point of not needing any hand seals meant people wouldn't expect to fight against such a technique. The general consensus was the Shunshin took high levels of concentration to use, and even previous Shunshin taijutsu masters required to use the hand seal in the beginning of the fight to activate the dot. Naruto had rewritten the very concept of the Shunshin taijutsu by being able to freely activate and deactivate it without the hand seal. Yakumo began using earth techniques as a counter-offensive. "I will not be humiliated by this failure." Yakumo was enraged by how the match was going. "I will make it to the tournament phase of the exams. I will make all of my clan's hard work and my talent known." "Oten. Shuriken," screeched Yakumo angrily. She went through 3 precise hand seals before stomping her right foot on the floor. 3 sharp earth-made shuriken flew from the ground toward Naruto's direction. A fast whizzing could be heard, but the projectiles seemed to go through Naruto and slammed into the far wall behind him. The afterimage of Naruto disappeared completely. "Brilliant," said Kurenai in admiration. "I have to apologize for earlier, Kakashi. It seems you have taught him well. Mixing Shunshin no with Bunshin no as a taijutsu technique. To think such 2 ordinances could be so effective." "I don't deserve much credit," said Kakashi, shrugging. "Naruto came up with this on his own. I just helped him with learning Shunshin by giving him the general guidelines." Kurenai nodded in respect before looking back at the match with the rest of the spectators. The audience's eyes were glued to the match now. Kushina was seething in thinly veiled anger. How could Yakumo be losing to that refusal? Idate looked on in disdain. Ino cheered on Naruto loudly as Asuma had trouble keeping her quiet. Yakumo repeatedly attempted to hit Naruto with the Earth Shuriken technique but only struck through afterimages. Yakumo attempted to mold the chakra to gain better precision, but Naruto's ability to simply sidestep proved this tactic to be useless. The Bunshin clones appeared more numerous, which made it more difficult for Yakumo to blow through them. The heavy gale surged forth as Yakumo was forced to put her arms in an X shape to guard her body. She began to skid backwards due to the force of the wind. Suddenly, fire erupted through the air as Yakumo roared in pain from a blazing fire scorching through her. "Pain. Dukakyu no," thought Naruto, expelling more of the fiery dot once he released the watch. Another fireball headed in Yakumo's direction. Naruto made a punch motion in the air in the direction of to add another technique to the grand fireball. Fuetin. Tatapa. The wave of air grew stronger and turned the giant fireball into another fiery eruption that burned its way through Yakumo's ultimate shield defense. Yakumo could no longer hold the defensive stance as her body spasmed in agony from the volcanic strikes. Once the third fiery eruption came, Yakumo was blown backwards onto the floor where she began twitching, spasming, and rolling on the ground in agony. The spectators watched in awe and horror as Yakumo's screams deafened the area. "Perhaps you should give up," stated Naruto austerely. "If you don't have an effective way to prevent my attacks from doing harm, then you will die." Shut up, I don't need your pity," snarled Yakumo, painfully rising up from the floor. "I'll beat the living shit out of you. Just you wait." "Why can't she just shut the hell up?" thought Naruto irritably. His frustrations were beginning to seep out. Why is it that no matter what I do, no matter what it is, there is always a put down? I don't want to hear any more of this. I don't want to snap. I refuse to act like a monster. Naruto was getting pissed off. He was absolutely fed up with the arrogance and condescending bullshit coming from the Uzumaki clan. He didn't want to hear any more. He was trying his best to honestly keep his hatred in check, but the asinine comments kept pushing him further and further to the exploding point. He just wanted to shut Yakumo up and try to end the match without any more of her blathering. Naruto pushed her back on the floor by punching the air and churning his chakra to create another Sealess Great Breakthrough technique. He inhaled fresh air before exhaling the Grand Fireball to scorch through Yakumo. Yakumo screamed from the top of her lungs yet again. Naruto added an extra amount of firepower to the fireball out of frustration. Ino and Chaoji began feeling uncomfortable with what Naruto was doing. Kushina simply glared at Yakumo for what seemed to be a slap to the Uzumaki clan. Apart from Squad 7, Hinata, and the Hokage, the rest of the spectators believed Naruto was not holding anything back against his opponent. It was clear the general consensus for the match had been wrong. What was originally thought of as a bad matchup for Naruto was proven to be a bad matchup for his opponent. Yakumo wouldn't last much longer if Naruto kept pressing his attacks. I refuse. Bit out Yakumo, she seethed from the excruciating pain once the fire began receding, to give up. I won't rest until I win. Yakumo jumped to her feet once the fire had subsided. She went through hand seals swiftly as possible. Oten. Doryuden. Shouted Yakumo desperately, she stomped her foot on the ground once the rapid seals were done. Try taking on a signature of the Hokage. The Jounin spectators looked impressed by her mastery of Sucha, and the genin looked excited. An earth dragon head came up from the ground and opened its maw. The dragon's mouth began spewing large mudballs at a swift and successive rate. They were traveling at a pace faster than Naruto's Shunshin speed. Naruto jumped to the side to avoid the first mudball. He used the Grand Fireball technique to blow through the second mudball, only to have large chunks of hardened shrapnel made of dirt explode in all directions. Naruto backflipped away to avoid them and then swerved out of the way to avoid the third mudball with a quick roll in the air to the left. Naruto used Shunshin to accelerate his jump high into the air to avoid the fourth mudball. Gyuuten. Shinkuha. Summoned Naruto desperately, it was getting increasingly difficult to avoid the velocious mudballs. Naruto moved his right hand to his left waist before slashing in a 45-degree angle. The invisible wind blade technique cut deeply through the fifth mudball. The mudball was split into 5 different pieces and blown down to the floor harshly. They hit the ground with harsh thuds. The sixth mudball whizzed toward Naruto unheeded. Naruto leaned his head back as he breathed in before breathing out a larger than usual Grand Fireball toward the last mudball. The mudball exploded in harsh fiery shards that painfully struck Naruto while bouncing harmlessly off Yakumo's ultimate shield. Got you. Hollered Yakumo happily, she added a few hand seals to the hand seal she had kept during the mudball assault and stomped her foot on the floor to activate the earth, Doten. Dasakiryu. The earth made a tremor for a few seconds before the earth dragon head sprouted from the ground to fly toward Naruto as a fully formed earth dragon. Naruto drowned down his panic to focus on an offensive. Naruto leaned his head back and blew out the dragon fire in a hasty attempt to stop the attack. The fiery dragon collided headfirst with the earth dragon. The colossal explosion took over the arena as a sickly black dust cloud overtook the space the explosion occurred. Sharp fiery pieces of earth shards blew in all directions as even the spectators ducked to avoid them. Hate was forced to endure as he guarded against them. Once the sickly black cloud dissipated, everyone could see Naruto unconscious on the floor. His close proximity to the explosion had knocked him out cold. Yakumo quickly took advantage and ran in his direction. She leapt in the air as she stretched her right arm back. She punched straight through Naruto's chest cavity and created a gaping hole through his body and a dent on the floor. Most of the spectators were horrified by the grotesque deed. Kushina and Idate smiled in relief and pride respectively. Squad 7 looked pensive. Another Naruto broke through the floor behind Yakumo, surprising most of the spectators. Sasuke and Sakura shared smiles. Naruto was about to use it when Yakumo turned her body to the side and cut through Naruto's heart with a precise spear jab with her black steel fingers. The second Naruto stared at her in stunned shock as he began choking on his own blood. I predicted that you would try something underhanded like this, said Yakumo sniggering in absolute satisfaction. She smiled wide as Naruto's coughing fit caused some of his blood to fall on her cheeks. She twisted her hand slightly just to hear him scream. Let me just say that you wouldn't have stood a chance against Idate-kun. He's in a whole different league altogether. Sasuke and Sakura watched in dazed horror. It hadn't occurred to Sasuke to activate his Sharingan because he felt distressed. Kiba, Ino, and Chaoji looked disgusted as they watched Naruto cough up more blood. Lee and Tenten couldn't help but look away despite their familiarity with such shinobi actions. It was made more painful because both of the participants were from Konoha. Niji stared impassively. Guy, Asuma and Kurenai couldn't help but gaze at Kakashi in remorse. Idate had a smirk of delight and Kushina had a small smile on her face as her shoulders sagged in relief. Hinata had activated her Byakugan briefly before staring impassively. The blood that had fallen on Yakumo's cheek suddenly started shining brightly. Yakumo's face scrunched up in confusion before her eyes widened in horrified realization. The Naruto below her and the Naruto above her both began shining brightly. A third Naruto sprouted from the ground behind her and hugged her from the back. The third Naruto shined brightly too. No, 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 chanted Yakumo shaking her head in denial. It was too late to try to avoid what was to come. No. The Bunshin Daibakuha activated. The three Naruto clones detonated as a gigantic explosion encompassed the battleground. A dark dust cloud skewed the field of view for a few minutes. Once it was settled, Yakumo was knocked completely unconscious with burn marks around her body. She was back in her normal human form since the dark steel bloodline deactivated upon her losing consciousness. Naruto stared tiredly at the defeated girl. He had used over half his reserves and he was aware that he had made her push her chakra coils to the limit. It obviously hadn't been easy for a genin to use a 2-level dragon in order to defeat him. After the minutes ticked by, Hayate raised his hand in the air to announce his decision. Participant Uzumaki Yakumo is unable to battle, said Hayate tiredly. He had been annoyed with having to avoid all the shrapnel and explosions. Participant Uzumaki Naruto wins. Kushina looked livid. Idate snarled in revulsion as he glared disdainfully at Yakumo. Sasuke, Sakura, Ino, and even Kurenai cheered. Kakashi nodded in approval. The rest began to either openly discuss or mule over the match silently. Naruto shunshin to where his team was while the medics arrived with a stretcher for Yakumo to take her to the infirmary. Naruto, I'm impressed. Said Ino enthusiastically as she walked into view, how did you get so good? Practice, said Naruto simply. Sasuke, Sakura, and I just kept a tight training schedule since all three of us hoped Kakashi-sensei would allow us into the exams. We didn't want to enter unprepared. Ino stared ahead stupidly as she realized her own foolishness for having entered the exam without her team properly training for the excursion. She realized how lucky she was to be alive and have Shikamaru's brilliant mind to aid in the strategic thinking. The problem was her team had plenty of brain but no brawn to back it up. She broke out of her reverie and tried to smile. Well, congratulations on your victory, Naruto, said Ino brightly. They exchanged smiles before Ino walked back over to her team in discomfort over Naruto's words. Kiba seemed to be glaring in Naruto's direction in either hatred or jealousy. Naruto honestly couldn't tell which one it was and he didn't care either. Kiba still stood by his lonesome away from the rest of his team. Congratulations, Naruto-san spoke to Hinata cordially. Naruto's focus was now on her as she came into view. Your team seems to be earning the eyes of many here. Keep it up and you may gain the attention of a noble clan. You're giving me too much credit, chuckled Naruto, shaking his head. People will see my public test scores from the academy and judge me on that. I'm known as the dead last of the Shinobi Academy and that title has lasted a lifetime in some cases. I believe you put far too much stock in the prior prejudices of people, said Hinata. She smirked at him whilst eyeing him greedily. A surprising upset will surely cause people to take interest in you. There are foreign influences determining which nation and specifically which clans will gain the most lucrative contracts. And as we both know, you're an eyeful of surprises. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise and he froze in muted shock because of her words. He readily understood what the deliberate meaning was. Hinata decided to move away, but not before a few of her slender fingers briefly brushed the back of Naruto's right hand. The message was abundantly clear to Naruto. The Hyuga heiress wouldn't have risked that public display of affection if she had not known his secret. She was marking her clan's territory. Hyuga Hinata had publicly set her sights on Uzumaki Naruto. Unbeknownst to either of the two, Kurenai had noticed the brief display. She had decided not to voice her approval of Naruto's performance in his match. A small smile tugged at her lips. The mistress would assist the Hyuga heiress in acquiring what she desired. Congratulations, Naruto, said Sakura cheerily. She provided a much-needed distraction for him. You showed the Uzumaki what's what. Glad those bastards were taken down a peg. I knew you could do it, said Sasuke proudly. He was smiling too. He clapped Naruto on the shoulder. Now our whole team is in the finals. Naruto grinned at the praise from his teammates. His chest swelled with happiness. It eased his mind from dwelling on Hinata's revelation and the Uzumaki clan's hatred. All three of them certainly needed a breather from the hectic week they had endured. Naruto strained to keep his own feelings and actions in check. The praise was certainly helping to alleviate some of what was burdening his mind. Kakashi clapped Naruto on his other shoulder to show he was proud of his student. He decided not to admonish Sakura for cursing, considering the circumstances behind her fight with the Uzumaki team in the Forest of Death. He had not taken kindly to learning from Naruto about Sakura fighting for her life against two teams who were out to specifically kill both of his male students. He couldn't do anything about it because what transpired within the Forest of Death had been legal by normal standards. Kakashi wouldn't be able to prove there was undue prejudice against either member of his squad from the Sound Team or the Uzumaki team. Moreover, Konohagakure no Sato was on high alert for Orochimaru, and the village's security took precedence over a more open-ended legal argument about the Chunin exams. Even though Orochimaru's initial target appeared to be Sasuke and Naruto, this had quickly diverted to wanton destruction within the Forest of Death. Orochimaru's objectives were no longer the paramount issue, security was on high alert to neutralize the Snake Sannin at all costs. Very few were concerned with the original targets because the power of the chakra blast that destroyed 1/8 of the forest had killed 4 genin teams. Kakashi had told the Hokage about the Kyuubi with Naruto being the root cause of that particular attack. No one knew that the attack Kyuubi had caused was the reason for the deaths. The Hokage and Kakashi were secretly conspiring to make sure nobody ever knew. The reports were modified to assure that the destruction would be pinned on Orochimaru. The deaths of the genin squads had been legal regardless, but they didn't want public knowledge of the Kyuubi's influence on Naruto. As such, the current predicament regarding Orochimaru was a mixed blessing for Kakashi. The next match was called forth on the electronic board. Hyuga Hinata vs Hyuga Neji. Many shared visages of surprise. Shino gave a nod of good luck and Kurenai gave Hinata a reassuring smile. The spectators appeared curious about the matchup. It was a well-known fact that Hyuga Neji was proclaimed as a Hyuga genius by the teachers at the academy and had many successful C-rank missions under the tutelage of Midogai. Many foreigners had placed safe bets on Hyuga Neji being Konoha's prominent star in the Chunin finals. The boy's record of learning Hyuga techniques at an advanced rate was stunning. It was rumored that he had already learned the 8 trigram 64 palms and the Hakishimkaten technique despite having no tutors from the main branch. Hyuga Hinata was not as well known to foreigners. Back during her earlier years, the girl had a reputation for being sweet and kind-hearted. However, over the years, she grew to accept the Hyuga customs, and the main branch spoke proudly of Hinata as a shining example of what proper discipline under Hyuga tutelage could accomplish. What caused this change in behavior wasn't known to the public. It was rumored that her father, Hyuga Hiashi, and her then Chunin bodyguard, Yuhi Kurenai, made an anonymous compromise that impacted Hinata's early development. Hinata had slowly grown into the expectations of the cold and confident heiress that her family desired her to be. Many civilian and shinobi modernists decried this was a travesty and that archaic cultural norms had brainwashed a bright young girl. Hinata's academic performance was not as spectacular as Hyuga Neji's. She had come in second place to Uchiha Sasuke in the academy and Haruno Sakura had outperformed her weapon scores. Neither Hyuga Hiashi nor Yuhi Kurenai had heeded these academic facts and the main branch continued to promote Hinata as a stellar shinobi. The rumors and academic performance records led people to believe that while Hyuga Hinata was a very good Kinwaichi in her own right, she was not a Hyuga genius like Hyuga Neji. The two Hyuga clan members regarded each other on the battleground. Both exhibited a cold disposition towards each other. Team Uzumaki paid close attention to the matchup. Learning as much about the Hyuga competition could be crucial. Hyuga Neji was known as one of the strongest genin in Konoha due to the rumors behind him. Hyuga Hinata was not to be taken lightly either. She had defeated Ranmaru in an even match within the Forest of Death. The Uzumaki were aware that her skills appeared to be on par with Hyuga Neji. The rest of the spectators were curious. Many had heard tales of the power of the gentle fist technique, but few had ever seen the display with their own eyes. Everyone knew about the Hyuga style, the Hyuga bloodline, and Hyuga history. The Konoha citizens weren't ignorant of the pertinent history involving their own home village and one of the most prominent clans to have ever existed within Konoha. Hinata-sama, began Neji coldly, he activated his Byakugan. I suggest you forfeit before you foolishly injure yourself. I'm sure everyone here knows who the stronger one of us is. Excuse me? Said Hinata in a clipped tone, her eyes darkened. Watch how you speak to a member of the main branch in public. People's roles in society are decided by the judgment of others, said Neji, ignoring Hinata's annoyed rebuttal. How we are perceived by others determines how we function in society. That is how people are fated to live. That is the way God chose to make our world. We all follow the rules that God governs for us. You, Hinata-sama, may act like a proud member of the Hyuga clan, but that is all it is in act. We both know the truth. While the Hyuga clan promotes you as a prime example of proper guidance, you still refuse to ever fight back against your own sister. You managed to convince Hiashi-sama to reject many prestigious suitors who the Hyuga Council felt were more than satisfactory to the clan's qualifications of what constituted a proper husband, and you're routinely allowed to leave the clan compound with only your Jounin sensei as supervisor. Hinata's eyes flashed a chakra pulse as her Byakugan activated in undisguised anger. This was not how a cadet family member spoke to a member of the main branch. You are clearly shying away from the Hyuga clan's honor. The Lord prescribed those duties to the Hyuga and decreed the roles of not just the main and cadet branch of the Hyuga, but the Will of Fire further elaborated on how all people are to live their lives. I have lived my life as mandated by the Lord. You have lived your life by making a public spectacle of yourself as a true follower of the clan, whereas in truth you have only grown bolder and more frivolous. Well, Niji spoke to Hinata with a cool smirk on her face. If what you say is the truth then you ought to forfeit, not I. After all, fate or God determines our lives despite everything else. By defying me, no matter under these conditions, you are defying your role in society. To fight against me is to face against your own fatalistic views on life. In actuality, no matter how weak I am and how strong you are, I should win because fate has ordained my predestined position as a main branch member, and that alone should make me mightier than you. As for my sister, you have no right to speak of my actions regarding my own sister, so I suggest you hold your tongue. That is not what I meant. Growled Niji in indignation, I did not mean. You're not. Correct. Prove me wrong, said Hinata smoothly, there was laughter in her eyes as she got into the Hyuga fighting stance. Hinata had openly ridiculed and rightly pointed out the problems with Niji's philosophy on life. Niji got into a battle stance in anger. He intended to show Hinata that he was right through might. He stubbornly refused to acknowledge the brokenness of such thinking. Niji ran toward Hinata intending to capitalize through swift blows to her. Hinata threw a scroll that unfurled itself while moving in Niji's direction. Niji slowed down in confusion and backpedaled upon seeing Hinata stealthily throw a kunai in his direction as well. Niji thanked the Lord that he had because the kunai tore some of the scroll and unleashed a humongous current of water that flooded the battleground. The onlookers were surprised by the unexpected turn of events. Hayate was the first to come up from the water, Hinata came up soon afterwards, and Niji came up last. Hayate coughed out water that unexpectedly inhabited his throat, Hinata smirked in satisfaction, and Niji appeared livid. The giant pool of water overtook slightly more than half the battleground in its depth. All three stood on the water with no problems. Niji struck Hinata again. He intended to finish the match quickly. He still hadn't perfected fighting on top of the water skillfully enough yet. He only had an intermediate level of balancing out fighting on top of water. The main branch was taught how to handle water walking and tree climbing at a very early age to help improve their gentle fist control. The cadet branch could only watch an observation by copying what they saw. It was assumed any cadet branch who joined the military ranks would just learn from their Jounin instructor regardless. Therefore, Hinata was far better suited in this terrain. Niji hadn't mastered proper control of the water walking exercise despite his tutelage under Mido Gai. Hinata bent backwards to avoid Niji's first strike before coming back up and exchanging blows with him. They both expertly deflected each other's hands. The spectators watched in astonishment as the two seemed evenly matched. Hinata then surprised Niji by performing an expert hop kick toward Niji's chin. Niji backed away from it, but his surprise broke his concentration and he fell into the water. Hinata openly chuckled before unzipping her jacket and throwing it off to her right into the water. It sunk down into the dark depths. Hinata was revealed to be wearing a loose fishnet shirt that exposed her belly button. She jumped high into the air in a backwards position and landed with her back to the water. The water surged forth obscuring Hinata from view. Once the water settled, Hinata was no longer in view. Niji came above the water and stayed a few moments in a doggy position before slowly getting up in a standing position. He shook the water out of his hair and coughed out the water he had accidentally ingested. He slowly studied his feet so the mistake wouldn't happen twice. As he was about to reactivate his Byakugan, a water dragon emerged from behind him. Niji's eyes widened in surprise as he turned around. He quickly turned full circle and began running away from the agile water dragon. The dragon roared as it got closer and tried to take a few bites at Niji. Niji ran toward the side walls and jumped onto the walls to stand sideways below the spectators' area. He ran across the wall at a faster pace than when he ran in water. The water dragon continued to try its bite to no avail. The water dragon got back to its starting position while roaring loudly at the sky. Niji continued to run around the walls at a quick pace, hoping he would be able to outrun the dragon if it decided to come at him once more. The water dragon followed Niji with its low body movements, and Hinata launched it to where she believed Niji would be. Niji jumped away from the wall the very last moment before the dragon slammed into it, but the torrent of water from the impact slammed into him. Water assaulted him for several minutes before he was able to get back up on the water and remain steady. He activated his Byakugan and turned to where he saw Hinata staring at him with a devilish smile. Niji took several shuriken from his pouch and threw them at her in a swift and precise manner. Hinata got into the gentle fist battle position and then started spinning. Niji started in abject shock. "Hakashim Kaiten," yelled Hinata with a hint of laughter. She caught all the shuriken easily and tossed them into the water. "I suggest applying real effort in this fight." Niji glared in contempt as she appeared bemused. He realized that he had severely and stupidly underestimated his cousin. He needed to keep the match close ranged if he wanted to win. He was sure Hinata wasn't stronger than him in hand-to-hand Taijutsu combat. Niji ran at Hinata at a hasty pace. He was desperate to reach her to take advantage of short-ranged combat. Hinata kicked water in Niji's direction and began to go through 3 quick seals. "Suiton. Mizuhari," shouted Hinata. Water needles sprayed in Niji's direction. Niji quickly stopped his movements with a frustrated look on his face. "Hakashu Kaiten," bellowed Niji angrily. The water needles bounced off the spinning chakra shield easily. "Do not think that you can win this match so easily." "Sorry if I'm making you fight fate," responded Hinata sarcastically. She wanted to destroy those beliefs of his. "Shut up," snarled Niji. He lost his composure entirely. His face grew red with anger. "What the hell would you know? You have no idea what it's like. No idea. My entire life has no meaning besides being a fucking slave." Hinata appeared taken aback by this admission. She stared at Niji, unable to rebuke him. He stared hatefully at his cousin. The spectators seemed to gain more interest by this secret confession. "You, the main branch, Hiashi-sama, and Konoha itself. All of you. What the fuck do any of you know? We cadet branch live only to serve as slave labor. We have to swear oaths of fealty to the main branch, to the Hokage, and to the village, and all we ever get in return is being exploited by all of them. Our Konoha pay stubs are given to the main branch. None of us are allowed to have dreams to aspire to like the rest of you. There will never ever be a day when a cadet branch member ever becomes Hokage, and who we marry to have children with is determined by the main branch. Our future generations will only live their lives in the same servitude as us. We serve by cooking, cleaning, picking the shit up of main branch members, and hell sometimes a bored main branch member will lower themselves by deciding to fornicate with a cadet branch member of their choice whenever it pleases them." The onlookers gawked at this raging admission. The Hokage clenched his teeth in anger at Niji's display of hatred. Team Uzumaki seemed amused. Naruto looked on sadly at Niji's wrathful confession. Sasuke was contemplative as he mulled over the information Niji had just shouted, and Sakura appeared depressed overhearing the admissions. The rest of the teams either looked disgusted or contemplative. There were rumors in Konoha about the cadet branch's treatment, and the lack of pay was a stipulation that had been around since the Shodame's era. It was done to bolster the support of the Hyuga clan and to protect their bloodline clan rights. The cadet branch was a long overlooked issue that many who had basic freedoms outright ignored. "Don't tell me that my beliefs are stupid," continued Niji, snarling in rage. "What else could make sense of all this? That it was a mere accident of birth that we are not free? That the government we fight for, our own family, and our fellow citizens won't acknowledge us as people because we just happen to be born on the wrong side of the clan? That we have this cage bird seal that can kill us at any moment because people just made up a bunch of rules? It was God who bound us to this life. Slaves are to obey their masters in the same vein they are to serve the Lord. We are the property of our masters as we are properties of the Lord. That is the only way this makes sense. That is the only way so many people could approve of this and see this as right, as just. Our slavery is God's institution of labor. We are fated to behave as God decreed. That is what I truly believe." Niji rushed forth toward Hinata in a blind fit of rage. Hinata stood stunned by his words for several seconds. She had never truly contemplated the perspective of the cadet branch for 6 years. She felt shame swell inside of her for never showing concern for what had obviously psychologically broken Niji's mind ever since his father was used as a sacrifice instead of Hiashi to appease Kumagakure's warmongers. Niji struck at Hinata intending to do the first 2 strikes of 8 trigram 64 palms, but Hinata briefly spun around to use her own variation of Hakashu Kaiten as chakra walls to block his attacks. Niji's attack was rebounded and his arms were forced backwards from the block. Hinata struck hard and fast with a palm strike to his sternum. The water behind Niji pushed away in a straight line from the intense chakra blow before Niji's body was pushed backwards into the air. He was blown backwards and rolled on top of the water through the sheer velocity of the strike. Niji was able to stop himself by skidding backwards on the water before being able to maintain his feet on top of the water. "Tsurekin no Jutsu," bellowed Hinata as she rapidly went through the hand seals. Niji ran toward the wall at full speed. Unfortunately, he was far too late this time. Hinata had immediately sent the water dragon rushing toward him and it was able to slam into Niji head first. Neji felt his body get slammed to the back wall before the torrential whirlpool of water pushed and pulled his body like a ragdoll within the murky depths of the water. Nausea slowly began to set in. He forced himself to stay conscious and swam to the top of the body of water after the damage was done. Neji breathed in much needed air as he coughed out water from his lungs. He placed his palms on the surface of the water to pull himself up and was able to steady himself on the water once more. He activated his Byakugan only to have the water below him swarm up like a cocoon and trap him inside a large ball of water. He stared to his side to find Hinata with a hand on the ball of water. "Tsurum no jutsu," said Hinata with a hand forming a half seal. "Give up, if you don't you shall lose regardless." Neji stubbornly and hatefully glared at her. He refused to give up. Slowly, however, as he struggled the water became denser and his movements grew slower. It was apparent that there would be no getting out of the water prison. Neji soon slipped out of consciousness. Participant Hyuga Neji is unable to battle. Declared Hayate raising his hand, participant Hyuga Hinata is the victor. Once the match was over, Hinata dispersed from her and began walking back to the spectator's box. She had turned away from Neji in order to focus on her future schemes. Her mind was preoccupied with thoughts of the best course of action in placing Naruto into the Hyuga clan. She had exhausted a great degree of her reserves using the 2 water dragons. Neji regained consciousness and looked around confused. Upon looking at the surprised faces of the crowd, he realized what had just happened. Feeling a mixture of humiliation and frustration, Neji rose up with unabated anger surging within him. He had lost his chance. Neji stared at Hinata's exposed back for a few brief seconds as she was walking away and decided to pounce on the opportunity. The Byakugan only had 359 degrees of sight. She wouldn't see the strike coming. He ran at her with all his speed. There were several cries of "Watch out! Behind you! Hinata, duck!" But it was to no avail. Hinata turned around in surprise just as Neji slammed his fingers between her chest. Hinata made a few gurgles as she began coughing up blood, while Neji's fingers seemed to act like a sword that had pierced through her heart. "Why?" she managed to gurgle out before her eyes rolled to the back of her head. "Hinata, no!" cried Kurenai in horror. "Hinata!" screeched Kiba in panic. Many of the spectators were stunned. Sasuke and Sakura appeared horrified at what happened to the Kunoichi who had worked so hard to save their lives. Naruto's eyes widened in shock as he slowly began shaking his head in denial. "This isn't happening. This isn't happening." The mantra overloaded his mind in a desperate attempt of denial. Surely, she had used a substitution at the last moment. Please no. Please no. Not her. Not Hinata, no, no, no. Hinata, please be okay. Mido Guy gazed in a mix of horror and self-loathing as he had clearly failed Neji in his training. He had focused too much attention on helping Lee overcome his disabilities that he had failed Tenten and Neji. That was horribly clear now. He had never noticed how damaged Neji was. Hinata fell backwards into the water and sank down into the dark depths. The spectators reacted in a panic to what appeared to be a deliberate murder. Hayate cursed aloud at having failed to stop it in time. The Hokage bellowed orders demanding people to stay calm. Neji gave a soft smile of happiness at having irrationally been able to let loose his pent-up hatred. He wasn't aware of the outside world around him. However, his vision was soon obscured by the eyes of God himself. Neji's eyes stared demurely in confusion before he was suddenly blasted painfully across the battleground. He slammed head first into the back wall where he immediately lost consciousness due to the velocity of the ferocious impact. His body fell back into the water where he lay unconscious on the surface of the water. Naruto had purposefully broken the flow of chakra in his legs to fall into the water after having blown Neji into the wall with an emotionally charged Shinra Tensei that had caused his Rinnegan to briefly flicker into existence. He had openly abandoned all pretense of their carefully guarded secret. Hinata's life was in serious danger. He reactivated his Rinnegan as he desperately searched for Hinata within the large body of water. "I have to find her, I have to find her, I have to find her," thought Naruto in grave turmoil. "She's not dead. She is not dead. I won't allow this to happen. Not her. Arrrgh, fucking Neji. I will fucking cut him to pieces if I don't find her. How could the proctor allow this to happen? I need to find her fast." Naruto finally managed to spot her body sinking slowly into the water. He quickly used Shunshin to get to her and held her securely in a bridal-style position before swimming up as swiftly as possible. He had deactivated his Rinnegan as he came up above water gasping for air. He shunshined to the surface of the water and expertly kept his feet steady while slowly walking over to the awaiting stretcher. "Move away, you filth." One of the medics forcefully grabbed Hinata while another pushed him away. Naruto was frustrated that they put their biases against him for being a demon spawn above caring for their patient. Kakashi arrived behind Naruto and firmly held his shoulder. Kurenai was talking to several medics nearby the stretcher about Hinata's condition. Mido Guy had walked toward the second stretcher that had emerged, while Naruto had been searching for Hinata and carefully placed Niji's fallen body onto it. Naruto was glad all the medics were trained shinobi who could stand on water. The stretchers seemed to have chakra seals that kept them above water too. It seemed the medics truly were trained for just about every occurrence. The medics walked back to the infirmary with both unconscious Hyuga clan members. Naruto despairingly notices an oxygen mask being placed over Hinata's face as they leave. Kurenai grudgingly decided not to follow after them because she still had a duty to her two other charges. The four shinobi on the field sunshine back to their respective spots on the spectator area. Hayate looked shamefaced at being unable to stop what had happened. Silence deafened the tower as the genin participants and Jounin mulled over the rapid events that transpired and the revelations thereof. Kushina had watched silently and openly snorted in disgust when she had seen the failure able to push the Hyuga boy to the far wall in what appeared to be a demonic chakra blast. She hadn't used her chakra sensing ability to see the cause, but she had decided that she didn't need to. It was glaringly obvious that the failure had begun using the demon's power. How else could he have done such an attack? Kushina decided that she would forgive Yakumo for her disgraceful defeat due to this unexpected truth that had just surfaced. The failure was attempting to use the Kyuubi no Yoko's power to gain the upper hand in the Chunin exams to even out his lack of real shinobi skills. She had no idea why he had an attachment to the Hyuga heiress and she didn't care to know. The Hyuga falling in the opinion of Konoha's general public would only help bring rise to the fame of the Uzumaki clan. She would leave all the Uzumaki clan's expectations on Idate. If he didn't succeed in his match then he clearly wasn't the one that she was looking for to lead the Uzumaki clan to unprecedented prosperity. The next match was called on the electronic board. Abiram Shino vs Uzumaki Idate. Idate smirked confidently as he jumped over the rails and stood firmly on the battleground. Abiram Shino slowly walked down the stairs and walked on the water with ease before walking to his designated position on the field of water. The Abiram clan was one of the most precise in learning chakra control skills earlier on in their shinobi careers. It was a necessity for them because of their control of insects. Once Hayate ordered the match to begin, Shino raised his hand up immediately. "I gave up," intoned Shino, some of the Konoha genin gawked in surprise. "There is no hope for me to defeat you because of your inherent abilities. It would be even more catastrophic in the current terrain." "What?" bellowed Ino annoyed, "why didn't you just say you give up before walking down there?" Shino turned to Ino to address her question. Many of the Konoha genin were wondering the same thing. "The rules require me to be present on the battleground to announce my defeat," said Shino shrugging, "that is the format in which the rules are organized." "Participant Abiram Shino admits defeat," said Hayate making it official, "participant Uzumaki Idate wins the match." Shino walked back to the spectator area while Idate kept his arrogant smirk as he made a few hand seals before sunshining back next to Kushina's side. Kiba met with Shino as he walked back to Kurenai's side. Now that Hinata was out of sight, Kiba felt more like his old self. Kiba had been pulled back by Kurenai to make sure he didn't assault Niji and possibly get himself disqualified. Kurenai had been forced to place him under a briefcase to keep him from attacking Niji like Naruto had. They had vanished once Kurenai had made it back to the spectator's box and Kurenai had patiently explained to Kiba that the medics would give Hinata the best care available because Hinata would be receiving care from the special ward reserved for wealthy bloodline clans. "Shino? I can't believe you," said Kiba in clear annoyance. Shino shrugged mildly. "Don't just shrug at me. You could have at least tried fighting him." "Kiba-san," began Shino turning around to meet his teammate in the eyes. "There are times when it is better to flee from your opponent to fight another day than to needlessly engage in a life or death battle and perish in its wake." "Bullshit," shouted Kiba rashly, "you're just making up cowardly excuses. You were afraid of that guy in the forest of death, weren't you? Look, I lost against him too, but if it had been my match then I would have fought him and I'd have done my best to win. Fuck life-threatening danger. You don't get anywhere without risks." "That is not the same, Kiba," replied Shino in a placating voice, "it is best not to take unnecessary risks when the danger could be your life." "You just don't get it," said Kiba, throwing his arms in the air to show his annoyance. "Just forget it. I'm just saying that I could take that guy with enough training. I'll get stronger and prove it after I beat the punk in my match." The next match was announced. Dosu landed lightly on the surface of the water to face Chaoji. Chaoji nervously walked down the stairs and fell into the water once he was deep inside. Chaoji raised himself to the surface, swishing wildly about coughing up water. Help. I can't swim," cried Chaoji in a panic, "my body's too large. I never learned. Help." The entire crowd stared stupidly at the confession. A shinobi who never learned to swim. It was downright pathetic. Asuma slammed his palm to his face as he had never thought to ask Chaoji if he knew such a rudimentary shinobi skill. This was an embarrassment. Hayate sighed in exasperation and called the match in Dosu's favor. Dosu was relieved. He had exhausted most of his chakra reserves just getting to the tower on time, and he had never been able to fix his sound arm from the damage the kunai had done in the Forest of Death. The matches beforehand had helped him rest, but his reserves were still very weak at the moment. Faddis, drawled Dosu, shaking his head. Unfortunately, Chaoji had heard and got angry. He used his family's body rolling and spun himself so quickly that he was able to maintain his body's surface on the water. Dog's eyes widened at the unexpected attack. Oh, shy. Chaoji slammed into him and knocked him out cold. Hayate slammed his palm to his forehead because he had already called the match. The proctor had to make sure the contestant couldn't battle anymore before calling the match. The Hokage would judge this as a bad decision on Hayate's part. Hinata and Niji's match didn't qualify under the same stipulation because Hayate had called the match before Niji would suffocate to death. Niji's attack afterwards was what he should have been able to put a stop to. The medics rushed in and carried both of them away. Chaoji had hit his head on the far wall and knocked himself unconscious after knocking Dosu unconscious. Ide, Kankuro, and Kiba rambunctiously laughed at the events that unfolded. Ino interchanged her glares towards all three of them. Sasuke, Sakura, and Naruto tried to hide their guilty smiles. Shikamaru and Shino kept silent and betrayed nothing. Shikamaru appeared more worried than contemplative. The last match was called on the electronic board. Rock Lee vs Sabaku no Gaara. Lee unraveled and tossed a thick scroll onto the battleground. He bit his thumb and drew a pattern onto his right palm. He jumped high in the air and slammed his right hand onto the scroll floating in the water. The scroll shined brightly before it began to seemingly absorb all the water in the battleground at an unprecedented rate. Lee made a backflip and grabbed the scroll to put it away in his green spandex jumpsuit. Lee was glad that his teammate Tenten was a fanatic weapons mistress. If not for her, he would have no way of facing the sand shinobi in front of him. She had helped teach him scroll sealing for even advanced seals of terrain elements so that he wouldn't be disadvantaged on their C-rank missions with Mido Guy. Although Gaara's sand would be at a severe disadvantage in the watery terrain, Lee would have been more disadvantaged because he would have had to exert himself at a rapid pace just to keep afloat on the water since he couldn't do any ninjutsu or chakra control for water walking. Once that was out of the picture, Rock Lee and Sabaku no Gaara began what would be the highlight of the preliminary Chunin exams. After a fantastic performance in Gaara's victory, Naruto couldn't help but feel angered because Gaara chose to crush Rock Lee's arm and leg after it was clear that Lee couldn't fight. Mido Guy had stepped in knowing he would be judged even more unfavorably since his entire squad had lost and two of them had clear deficiencies that Guy had failed to take care of. While making his way up the stairs, Gaara had briefly caught Naruto's eyes and gave him a visage of contempt. Naruto instantly recognized what that meant. Gaara was aware of Naruto being a. Naruto had sensed the other boy's chakra to recognize the similarities, but he had no idea how Gaara found out about him. The exams were becoming far more dangerous. The last match was over. Hayate called the genin spectators to come forward onto the ravaged battleground as they brought a raffle box to make a selection of who would face each other in the final public examination. Each contestant took a raffle number when they were called, with the exception of those that were in the infirmary due to unforeseen circumstances. Hiba, having been unable to fight in the preliminaries, was allowed to take a raffle paper first. Once Hayate called all the numbers, the other proctors set up the matches on the electronic board. Nara Shikamaru vs Sabaku no Tamari. Haruno Sakura vs Inuzuka Kiba. Uzumaki Idate vs Uzumaki Naruto. Hyuga Hinata vs Dosu. Sabaku no Gaara vs Uchiha Sasuke. Kankuro would be on reserve if one of the contestants failed to make it to the exam. Otherwise, he would participate in the semi-finals against one of the winning contestants. Once they were all free to leave, Naruto gave a quick farewell to his teammates and sunshine to the Konoha hospital. The tower was being closed for the remainder of the day, so the injured or unconscious genin had already been moved to the hospital. Naruto shunshin outside of the hospital room where he sensed Hinata's chakra. He hadn't even bothered going to the receptionist because he knew that he wouldn't be allowed anywhere near Hinata's room. He had used his best detection avoiding abilities like in his match with Yakumo. Naruto gently opened the door and walked inside. His heart plummeted when he noticed the breathing mask, Hinata's face crunched in pain, and a cup with blood in it by her bedside. Hinata opened her eyes to gaze in his direction silently before raising herself up slowly and removing the breathing mask. She swiftly took the cup of blood and began coughing blood into it. She held her chest in clear pain from the exertion she was putting forth. Naruto brushed away the grimness that was slowly overtaking his mind as he helplessly noticed this. Hinata put the cup back by her bedside drawer and turned to face him expectantly. She wiped away the blood on her lips with the back of her left hand. Hey, I came because I was worried, admitted Naruto shrugging. It's probably nothing, I'm sure the doctors will find a way to. Close the door, said Hinata in a clipped tone, it broke no room for argument. Naruto followed her instructions. Lock it. Naruto locked the door and walked toward her bedside. He felt out of place. He didn't exactly know how to comfort her, and he had no idea when she would get better. He tried to think of something quickly. Hinata looked down at her bed sheet sullenly as she began gripping them tightly. An air of depressive awkwardness hung over them. Naruto wasn't sure what to make of it. He didn't want to break the silence by saying something stupid, and he wasn't really sure when she would be out of the hospital. Perhaps she was depressed because the doctors told her she wouldn't be able to participate in the Chunin exam finals. It was a possibility. Naruto, said Hinata demurely, she gazed back up at him. Her cheeks were streaked with tears. Naruto gazed at her in concern. I'm dying. Naruto's world shattered. Chapter 8. A Promise Unforgotten. Orochimaru was absolutely furious. He sat upon his throne room in the dark caverns of one of his secret Itagakure military bases. His enhanced eyesight allowed him to read through the deluge of written material within the darkness. Yujiro Yagura's tome of scripture was a total fucking joke. Orochimaru had thoroughly read through the manuscript during his current recovery period. He hadn't divulged anything noteworthy that could explain the Rinnegan awakening within the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. The manuscript itself contained a bunch of insane suppositions regarding the framework of the world, an ignorant view of bloodlines that was completely unsupported by the laws of nature, and essentially proved that Yagura was nothing more than a raving lunatic who was better off dead. Orochimaru couldn't help but be angry with himself. He had ordered Kabuto to leave his vital role as a spy in Konoha to go on a mad quest to get the original manuscript of a religious book that was long known to be the workings of a crazed moron. Reading the original only confirmed that the book was crap. He had hoped there was some secret about Jinchurikis in the original work that linked them to creating bloodlines, but instead he had read through pages upon pages of bullshit. He had learned nothing of value, his spy was no longer useful in a nation that he was ready to launch a full-scale invasion upon, and he had yet to fully recover from the ordeal within the forest of death. Kabuto had created some medicinal remedies to speed up his recovery. Orochimaru impatiently felt it wasn't fast enough. He wanted to be back on his feet as quickly as possible. He hated feeling useless. He hated that he was forced to recuperate because of a fight against Regen and that should have easily been handled. Even with Kyuubi's interference, the boy shouldn't have been that strong. Clearly, the Rinnegan had some sort of factor in the Jinchuriki's strength. A small amount of malice began building within Orochimaru. Uzumaki Naruto was a representation that there was some grain of truth to the worthless myths contained within religion. As Orochimaru simmered in his anger for the following month, he couldn't help but think that Uzumaki Naruto was also a representation of his failure. He had lost the opportunity to give Uchiha Sasuke the cursed seal. The Rinnegan user had caused him to be in this embarrassing situation. He intended to make the Uzumaki brat suffer someday. Kabuto sneaks back into Konoha a few days prior to the invasion and pays our informant a visit. The Sandaime Hokage entered the hospital room of Uzumaki Karen. Haku hastily stood up and held a firm posture in respect to the Hokage. The Hokage waved him off and instructed him to sit back down by Karen's bedside. I owe you an apology, Haku-san, said Sandaime calmly. He walked over to the foot of Karen's bedside to take the clipboard and began skimming it over. He put it back by the foot of the bed and gazed directly at Haku. I'm afraid that I couldn't spare too much time focused on helping your case because I needed to make new adjustments to the security detail and personally oversee the Chunin exams. All because of Orochimaru's boorish attack in the forest, as you know. Fortunately, no Konoha genin were hurt and the villages of Kurigakure, Iwagakure and Kumagakure cannot hold us responsible thanks to the death waiver being signed off for all 4 teams that were killed. Haku tiredly nodded in understanding. He hadn't been able to get a decent night's sleep because of the precautionary conditions that he was forced to live in. The chair by Karen's side had been his only means of sleep. He was isolated from anything else. One of the young nurses had been nice enough to provide hospital supplements for him to eat. He was gracious for her hospitality and thanked her. If not for that, Haku would have starved by now. There was a brief pause as the Hokage peered directly into Haku's eyes. Haku fidgeted at the Hokage's contemplative gaze. The Hokage seemed to be making a serious internal decision about something of great import. Please don't tell me that you don't believe me, thought Haku sorrowfully, after all this. Haku-san, I require your complete secrecy as a newly instated citizen of Konoha, said the Hokage in a commanding tone. If you cannot promise me that, leave this room and return to the Uchiha compound. I have already vouched for your sincerity regarding your story. He stopped speaking. Haku was at a loss for words. He was entirely confused by these new set of circumstances. He chose to stand up straight despite his haggard appearance. I shall fulfill my duty to Konohagakure to the best of my ability, sir. He meant it too. He wanted to prove his loyalty to Konoha, especially after the harrowing events that had transpired. Haku wanted to show he was trustworthy to the Hokage. The Hokage gave him a measured gaze before slowly nodding and fixing his attention back upon Karen's unconscious form. The Hokage sighed softly before going through a complex string of hand seals and using his personal perfected version of the Shintention no. Sarutobi, entered the mindscape of Uzumaki Karen. Worthless. Spoke the 6-year-old Karen in disgust, how can you live with yourself? Look at yourself. You're no better than those shallow bastards. An older Uzumaki Karen was on her knees crying in misery. Her hands obscured her face as she cried in shame. She was wallowing in a mixture of self-pity and self-disgust over her sin. She was nothing more than a heartless monster. The Sandaime Hokage came into view behind the crying 12-year-old. He firmly gripped her shoulder and began willing them out of her mindscape. You can't protect her forever, you decrepit fool, snarled the younger Karen glaring at both of them. She will have to face me one day. On that day, I shall take hold of her powers and destroy her from within. She cannot keep turning away from her own shadow. Sarutobi refused to acknowledge the other Karen at all. He knew deep down that it was the truth. Karen couldn't keep running away from the issue. It would destroy her from within if she didn't deal with her inner conflicts soon. Sarutobi broke the concentration on that and Karen shot up from her bed. Haku yelped in surprise at the sudden turn of events. Karen barely looked around in confusion before noticing the hospital gown she now adorned. She exchanged glances between the Hokage and Haku. She breathed in and out through her nostrils before using the back of the bed to rest her back, so she was in a sitting position on the bed. Karen gestured to the Hokage about Haku, but the Hokage firmly shook his head. Karen leaned back on the bed and closed her eyes. Her face scrunched up in irritation before she breathed once more and reopened her eyes to focus on the Hokage. Slowly, her features changed from anger to sadness. I'm sorry, Sarutobi-sama, spoke Karen crestfallen. She tried to maintain eye contact with the Hokage through the shame she now felt. I slipped out of control again. I tried to fight back and hold it at bay, but I couldn't. She gestured toward Haku as she began her next explanation. She would make sure to tell the truth. Akahashi told me that mother wanted me to recruit the Hyutin bloodline user for the clan. I attempted to keep the discourse solely about the benefits of joining the clan and the clan's history, but Haku-san expressed indignation. Him. She frowned as she lowered her face in shame for what happened. Haku stared between the Hokage and Karen, clueless of what was going on. The Hokage mulled over the information before he began speaking. The young lady, who nearly jeopardized this boy's life, said to the Hokage with a tone of finality. Haku paid close attention as Karen began covering her face with her right hand. He was a suspected traitor to the village, and I was barely able to keep my Anbu from locking him up under false pretenses. I was forced to delay helping him because of vital national security interests and the ceremonial Chunin exams which require my immediate attention. This is not even mentioning the political controversies that have arisen thanks to Uchiha Sasuke's ultimatum, the internal Hyuga clan conflict that has now been made more public, and your own mother's despicable mannerisms during the Chunin exams. Karen removed her hand from her face and gazed back at her leader. She seemed to have paled at the Hokage's words. The Hokage held her in place with his stern gaze. Haku got the impression that Karen usually wasn't reprimanded by the Hokage. As your commander-in-chief, I'm ordering you to inform him of your condition immediately, said Sarutobi pointedly. The Hokage was not happy with what happened to Anko and what almost happened with Haku. I require the assistance and cooperation of both of you to protect Konohagakure from Orochimaru's imminent attack. Intelligence indicates that Orochimaru is planning to launch a full-scale invasion sometime within the month. We do not yet know the specific date. For the following month, the two of you shall coordinate the protection of the Shinobi Academy together. The both of you are hereby mandated to conduct training sessions together to build teamwork under the instruction of Anbu Captain Tenzo Yamato. Once he has deemed your teamwork sufficient, you shall begin your mission. Is that clear? Both straightened up at the tone of the Hokage and nodded their affirmative to the commands given. Excellent, responded the Hokage authoritatively. Now, there is the matter of Mitarashi Anko's death. I have already written a version of the story that shall satisfy anyone curious of the encounter and the mysteries behind it. It shall portray Mitarashi in a favorable light. Mitarashi Anko was paralyzed by Orochimaru's ninjutsu before you two dropped in to stop him. Both of you attempted to coordinate your attacks, but your inexperience with teamwork and Orochimaru's overwhelming power caused you both to lose. Haku wished to stand his ground and fight. Mitarashi Anko placed him from behind to push both of you out of harm's way and took the blow meant to kill both of you. Afterwards, she was forced to place Haku under once more to sign the snake contract so that Orochimaru wouldn't take full control of the snake summons. Once that was done, she died peacefully and Karen fell unconscious from chakra exhaustion, leaving Haku in his befuddled state of mind to take Yu and Anko's remains to the hospital. Karen nodded her acceptance to the fictitious story. Haku frowned in confusion at what was going on. But Hokage-sama, interrupting Haku hesitantly, said, "That's not what happened." In Haku's sluggish state of mind, he realized his mistake too late. Sarutobi leveled his gaze upon the young Hyutin user. "Haku-san, understanding this," said Sarutobi coolly, "Mitarashi Anko was hated by the majority of the village due to her connections with Orochimaru. If they were to hear that she died a pointless death, then people would continue to scorn her name until she was a forgotten part of history. If we change certain elements of the story to make her seem like a heroic figure, then her memory shall be seen in a more positive light. She will be a tragic hero facing a nefarious villain to save two unique bloodlines that are currently held in high regard in the village. Creating a black and white, us versus them type of storyline is what is most effective in a real-life controversial event. In this portrayal, which only leaves out a few minor details and adds a few better details, there will be more acceptances because it's what people want to hear." Haku frowned at what the Hokage told him. He noticed Karen was staring expectantly at him too. Haku grudgingly couldn't deny that one little white lie could help Mitarashi's fallen image in the long run, and the Hokage was most likely going to use this story to his political advantage to gain more shinobi recruits for the military. Haku didn't care whether the story made him look incompetent or not. He couldn't help but think over Anko's death and accept the snake contract. "I have no objections, sir," said Haku at once. He hid his internal bitterness over the decision. "It's the right course of action to take," thought Haku conflicted. "I don't even understand why this is bothering me." Sarutobi made for the door, but a call from Haku stopped him. "Hokage-sama, wait," said Haku agitated. The Hokage gave him a visage of impatience. "The Sand Shinobi participated in the Chunin exams. Naruto told me that the red-haired member of the group was a dot." The Hokage stared at him with a stunned gaze. Sarutobi hastily made a short nod before briskly walking out of the room and quietly shutting the door. He had more matters that required his attention. Foreign dignitaries and their lucrative contracts would be coming to Konoha soon. After that, he would need to strategize the defense plans against a possible invasion. "About my secret," began Karen, sighing softly. Haku's attention was drawn back to her. "It's about my bloodline. It's powerful. I can use and reshape matter around me into anything that my imagination wills it to, but it has a few fatal flaws. The Kurama bloodline cannot create life like the Mokutan bloodline, and it cannot use the body of a living person against themselves. Their clothes and weapons alleviate this problem usually. It takes a large surge of chakra to effectively use and maintain my realities, depending on the scope and scale of the attack. I could easily die from chakra exhaustion because of this. Lastly, the problem that caused me to lose consciousness." Karen began rubbing her head with her left hand as she tried to keep the emerging thoughts at bay. Karen lowered her face to look ahead of her to concentrate. She used a breathing technique to calm herself and then turned her attention back to Haku. Haku began remembering small portions of their conversation in the Forest of Death. "I have a second personality," revealed Karen quietly. Haku's eyes widened in surprise. "It's one of the reasons the Kurama bloodline went extinct years ago. Too many of its members suffered deaths because they couldn't manage to surpass the second personality. I found out in ancient journals written by members of the Namikaze clan. My mother doesn't know. No one in my clan knows. I only told Sarutobi-sama when I began noticing that I lost track of where I was, lost track of how much time had passed by, and began having vivid dreams of my 6-year-old self. Blaming me. Is there nothing that can be done about it?" asked Haku honestly. How could anyone effectively deal with an evil personality within them? What could appease it? "It may decide to murder me," said Karen sullenly. Haku looked horrified. "I'm honestly not sure. It's a part of me. Do you know the psychological basics of the psyche? The ID, the ego, and the superego. This is basically my ID. People who have the Kurama bloodline must accept this representation of the ID, a truthful personal aspect of themselves that they either deny or have lost to move forward and wield the Kurama bloodline with some unique personal power." Haku thought over the information that he was just told. He recalled the conversation in which she had placed a firmly fake attitude to try to coax him into joining the Uzumaki clan. He could already guess what the ID wanted. The ancient Namikaze journals call it a shadow or the true self. Haku attentively remained quiet and listened. "All of these personal journals advise that I accept this aspect because it'll be an acceptance of something that is a deep part of my conscience. This isn't necessarily a good thing depending on what someone's core moral beliefs are. In ancient times, most of the Kurama nomads thrived because they accepted the love of killing for the thrill of battle." "Why haven't you defeated your shadow yet?" asked Haku. "It seems like you know exactly what to do." Because it's not that easy, said Karen, moving away from Haku's side of the bed, and what the ID desires usually isn't so simple. She got to the other side of the bed and swung her legs around to the floor. She stood up and walked toward the window to see the sunny skies of the village. Birds chirped in the distance, and Haku noticed that Karen's gaze was fixed on the Hokage monument. He already knew which Hokage she had her gaze on. Haku made sure not to let his eyes wander and brushed away the sexual thoughts assaulting his mind. Karen was an attractive young girl and currently only wore a knee-length hospital gown. Haku decided that he was just tired because of the lack of sleep and his thoughts were wandering as a result. My mother may seem like a total bitch because of what she's done, breaking Karen after a few minutes of silence. Haku chose to simply observe, but you have to understand the background that she came from to really understand her motivation. My mother is an ambitious woman. She's devoted her entire life to restoring the old clans of Kurigakura under the name Uzumaki. She witnessed her entire family slaughtered by the bloodline purges. A whole province of towns within Kurigakura from where she lived as a young girl, the revolutionary troops under Yujiro Yagura raided every store, house, and took these people out of the streets to behead them after the civil war of fog was over. My mother lived in constant distress and danger for 2 weeks. She barely made it out to Konoha by sheer luck that she found a traveling cart to hide in and has spent her entire life in Konoha as a humanitarian activist to promote taking in refugees from Kurigakura. She made it her sole mission to bring them here, provide aid, and give shelter to them. When the Kyuubi threatened to wipe out Konoha, my father used Naruto as the container to seal the damned beast. My mother only found out the day after because she had fallen asleep after giving birth. I know that it's not fair to Naruto. I know that she acts like an irrational lunatic about the subject. But god damn it, there's a real reason for it. What she saw as a young girl damaged her. Why didn't she seek help? Questioned Haku. Surely, psychiatry would have helped her overcome. Karen shook her head while still looking intently at the monument. Haku tiredly realized how foolish his question was. Virtually everyone in the village harbored a hatred for Uzumaki. Kushina's pride as a clan head would have been shamed if word got out that she sought mental help. You could help me, said Karen emphatically, turning around to gaze at Haku directly in the eyes. If you truly wished, you could join the clan to help change it from within the current clan structure. The elder advisors of the clan are demanding that the clan retain a patriarchal system to restore old traditions. This would smooth its transition as a legitimate clan within Konoha and the international community. You're only 2 years older and already at a level like me. If you joined and showed promise as one of the Fire Daimyo's bodyguards, perhaps personally formed a type of cordial relationship with him, you could be a contender to become the new clan head within the coming years. You would replace Idate as the current chosen successor and become my fiancé. I would do all that was within my power to support you. Once you took leadership, we could change the interrelations of the Uzumaki clan so that Naruto would be accepted back in and no future generations would have to suffer like that ever again. We could change everything for the better. Haku considered it. He honestly considered the proposition given to him. There were merits to the plan. This honestly could help Naruto in the long run, thought Haku speculatively. She's dropped the act and decided to be honest with me about it. But. I'm sorry, but I'll have to refuse your offer, said Haku, shaking his head. Karen appeared crestfallen. Assuming we were successful, it could help Naruto in the long run, but as of right now Naruto needs all the support from those around him. It was through him that I was given this opportunity to be part of Konohagakure. I laid him by being there next to him instead of making a gamble on a plan that has too many variables to work smoothly. Aside from that, I made a vow to my former mentor about living my own life. I cannot renounce that. I'm not exactly leadership material either. Karen appeared devastated by his words. Haku wasn't sure if it was his refusal, something he had said in his answer, or perhaps both. Somehow, Karen was hurting inside because of his words. Karen quickly turned back to face the window so that she wouldn't be looking at Haku. This whole issue. What the ID wants and your plan, began Haku insightfully, you want to be there for Naruto as a real sister. Leaving him behind hurt you too. It's my fault that they abandoned him, said Karen sadly. Haku's eyes widened in shock and confusion. I had graduated from the Shinobi Academy within a mere year thanks to the strict training schedule that I had to follow. I had already made it to genin rank under the extra summer classes that my mother paid for. She had already set up plans with the daimyo for the clan to join as his palace guards. Everyone in the family was anxious to start living under better care so that we could have improved housing, medical supplies, foodstuffs, and the more greedy ones desired the luxury afforded to them. Naruto. Nobody valued him. I only realized after he was left behind that the entire clan loathed him to an extent. His existence was a reminder of the hardships, the massacres, and the grief that the clan endured. Everyone in the clan had an irrational fear that letting him grow up with knowledge of clan secrets or to grow up as a success of some form would bring forth an apocalyptic doom upon the clan. My brother was a very enthusiastic and naive child. He didn't see or understand that the family he and I cherished so much thought he was just as much of a monster as the other villagers. My mother and the elders tried to hold back and be accepting of Naruto at first, but it became clear to me a few months after we became part of the daimyo's palace that they had only held out for almost 6 years because they wanted to see if Naruto was of any value to them as a weapon. Once I started attaining success and he became overshadowed, they chose to drop him out of the clan altogether. I don't even understand why my mother still has him registered in the clan's name. I know for a fact that she doesn't love him. And what you desire is for the whole family to be back together? Questioned Haku cautiously, unless I misunderstood. I want my twin brother back, answered Karen sniffling as she wiped the tears from her eyes. A year later I decided to see how he was doing one day. The conditions that he lived in were deplorable. I saw the Hyuga girl with him in a secluded pond area a few times. She encouraged him, she helped him, and I could only stare from far away. I had no place in his life anymore and I didn't deserve to be called his sister. I lied to myself. I would tell myself that I'd leave the bigots of the clan once I became and help Naruto as a real family member should. 2 years passed and I never did anything but watch from afar. I had become and I continued to do nothing. It frustrated me how I could feel so depressed but still choose never to give him so much as a letter. I eventually stopped lying to myself and admitted the truth. I didn't want to live a harsher lifestyle where I had to take care of myself. I liked having a good meal, a warm bed, and furnished living conditions. I know that with my training as a kunoichi made that unnecessary, but the fact was that I had a supportive family to fall back on if I was ever sick or injured. I didn't want to disappoint my mother either. I wanted her to remain proud of me and my accomplishments. Haku realized a familiar similarity that Karen had with her twin brother. It was a stunted growth in maturity with a deep desire for the approval of a mother who simply lived far too cold-hearted a life to show genuine affection. The Uzumaki clan and particularly Uzumaki Kushina had damaged the two 12-year-olds in a rather distressing fashion. The shadow sees me as a cage, continued Karen. Haku realized the tears were still cascading down her cheeks. It loathes my life choices. It keeps pushing me to stand up for myself and change the course of my life because I've felt so much guilt over what happened to Naruto. I never made it too special because it started interfering with my missions to take control of my body and to observe what Naruto was doing from a distance. I tried to suppress it, but it only became worse. I begged Sarutobi-sama for help and he helped manage to put me in low-key missions so that my problem wouldn't draw too much attention. I think he's at the limit of his patience now because it nearly cost you a normal life in Konoha. It was manageable 2 years ago and even last year, but now it's become a detriment to my everyday life. It sees me as unworthy of being Naruto's sister, and the more I fight my own beliefs of right and wrong, the more the shadow is inclined to simply kill me because I've become an accomplice to what I personally view as an evil system. I'll assist you however I can, said Haku. Finally, Karen turned around with a tear-stained face. But you should accept the shadow that you're fighting. I know it's hard but what's the worst that could happen? I'm sure Naruto would accept you back. How can Naruto accept me when I can't even accept myself? Said Karen bitterly, her gaze drifting to the floor. Her palms clenched. I wouldn't blame him for hating me, and I honestly don't deserve his acceptance back. I chose to abandon him when I decided to do nothing when I finally had the means of changing my own life. I want him to be accepted back in the clan. That would make things right. The Uzumaki clan needs a strong leader in the future. My fiancé is strong for his age, but he's only loyal to special privileges granted to him by the clan. He isn't true leadership material, and I'm honestly not sure what will be expected of me once I'm married to him. He's grown up under the deranged thinking that Naruto is a talentless failure who could transform into a ravenous monster that would attempt to slaughter the clan once he's older. It was only my inspection of what Naruto was doing for 6 years that kept me grounded in reality, and I'm still reduced to a campaigner for the Uzumaki agenda in the public sphere. I had hoped that you would accept my offer so we could change the shape of the clan for both the clan's and Naruto's benefit, but I can understand why you would be averse to joining. I promised myself to help Naruto when I was younger. But I guess I just couldn't find a way to fulfill that promise. I'll help you with containing your shadow problem, affirmed Haku carefully. I won't accept the Uzumaki clan's proposal, and I honestly have no interest in becoming a clan leader. I just want to live a normal life. I don't have any higher aspirations and I don't feel that I need them to be happy. Karen nodded in acceptance to Haku's clarification. The two of them had just grown in understanding and a friendship. Kiba excitedly ran in the hospital halls with Akamaru by his side. Kurenai shouted at him to slow down as she walked at a leisure pace with Shino toward Hinata's hospital room. A young nurse had surreptitiously informed Kurenai of Hinata's actual condition. Kurenai had made sure to wear a firm mask before turning to the two of them and directing them to Hinata's room number in the Bloodline medical ward. Kiba excitedly burst through Hinata's door, only to see something that made his elated heart plummet to his stomach. His gaze slowly grew livid as he watched them without announcing his presence. He dropped his gaze to the floor, unable to keep his glare because he felt so much self-hatred. There was Uzumaki Naruto sharing a chaste kiss with Hinata on the lips. Kurenai and Shino walked in to see the spectacle. Kurenai failed to hide her amused smirk, and Shino took note of what he would have to report to his father so that he could tell the Hyuga clan elders as per the agreement, and Shino further took note of the fact that Hinata had purposefully planned this. The two broke the kiss. "Hinata, I swear that I'll find a cure," said Naruto sincerely. He gently moved some of her bangs from her eyes. "That's a promise. I'll find a way to master that power if I have to. You will get through this. I'll do everything I can to make sure of it." Naruto quickly took a cup by the bedside table and handed it to Hinata. Hinata coughed into it, but her view was obscured by Naruto's back. Hinata made a toss to the other side of the bed where the cup hit the garbage bin on the opposing side. She turned back and shared a secure hug with Naruto for a few moments. Naruto whispered something in Hinata's ear. They broke apart and Naruto slowly turned around to walk away. "Remember our agreement," forced out Hinata through a fit of coughs. Naruto turned around briefly to give her a firm nod before turning back to give Squad 8 a firm nod too. After that, Naruto left through the door and shut it quietly behind him. "What the hell was that?" shouted Kiba sharply. He glared at Hinata accusingly. "He wasn't registered as a visitor of yours. We were the first ones to get here." "Kiba, keep your voice down or I'll have the nurses escort you out," threatened Kurenai, displeased with his behavior. "I will not tolerate random outbursts like that in a hospital. Do I make myself clear?" Kiba jammed his hands in his pockets and looked down on the floor in anger. He couldn't believe that he was being reprimanded over a legitimate question. "Don't I have a right to know?" Thought Kiba was trying to rationalize his mistakes. "I'm her teammate." Kurenai and Hinata began talking as Kiba continued to glare at the floor and Shino stood silently to observe. Kiba suddenly shot his head up before recoiling in pain. He rubbed neck with his left hand before rudely beginning to interrupt Kurenai and Hinata's conversation. "Hinata, were you so into that dead last?" snarled Kiba angrily. "You deserve better. You're the Hyuga heiress. What the hell does he have that others don't have?" "Dead last?" peeked Hinata airily. She gave a condescending gaze towards Kiba. "As I recall, he defeated a member of the esteemed Uzumaki clan on his own just as I did. Not only did you fail to do that in the Forest of Death, but you lucked out by not being required to fight in the preliminary rounds of the Chunin exams at all. Naruto-kun informed me of what happened after I was sent to the hospital. From what I have observed, you're the weakest link in the finals for the Chunin exams. You have no right to start speaking as if you have some prestigious accomplishment above him. You don't. You never did and I'm certain that you never will. He is going to be facing the chosen successor of the Uzumaki clan. If you ever had the misfortune of fighting against someone of that caliber, then you would surely lose. All you Kiba are is a boastful and arrogant fool." Kiba flinched as he felt deeply hurt by Hinata's speech about his abilities. Not wanting his crush to see him cry, he turned around and ran out the doorway. A footfall of steps was in hot pursuit of him. Kiba rounded out the door before a firm hand gripped his shoulder. The door to Hinata's room closed softly as Kiba turned around to face his sensei. "Kurenai-sensei. Why?" bit out Kiba stupidly. His cheeks began to tear up as he looked at the floor defeated. "Why doesn't she feel the same way about me like I do her? I try my best to impress her, I try to get her to talk to me, and I help her in missions all the time, but she doesn't give me the time of day like she does him." "Kiba," began Kurenai slowly. She had to choose her words carefully. "What happened in the forest to cause a rift between you two? I knew something was up, but I couldn't voice it in public in front of everyone. Tell me what's wrong." "You were avoiding Hinata and Shino like the plague until after Hinata's match." "Well, Kiba stopped speaking. He felt confused and angry with Hinata. Slowly, he tried to calm himself enough to recount his tale. Flashback. Kiba slowly regained consciousness as he found himself being levitated a few feet from the ground by bugs. He screamed in surprise due to his grogginess and caused the insects to panic. They promptly dropped Kiba onto the floor and returned inside Shino's body. "Kiba, please remember that my insects are there to help," stated Shino flatly. He turned around to gaze at the boy slowly rising up to his feet. "They are just as much your teammates as you and I are teammates. They do not need to be feared." Yeah, said Kiba, annoyed as he brushed dust off of himself. Akamaru ran to Kiba's feet yipping happily. "Glad to see you're alright, Akamaru." Kiba affectionately knelt down to pet Akamaru's head. Shino turned around and walked in a quicker pace out of minor annoyance. Hinata was ahead of both with her Byakugan active to watch out for enemies. They had decided to stick to the ground to better avoid enemies stopping trees because of Kiba being unconscious. They had left the battle against Team Uzumaki and the Sound Shinobi hours ago. Kiba ran up past Shino so that he would be behind Hinata. He demanded questions answered. Akamaru had just told him that they had left the Earth Scroll for Squad 7 and Squad 10 to squabble over. Kiba felt they should have taken the scroll. It was the one they needed. Yo, Hinata. Bellowed Kiba angrily. Hinata sighed in exasperation before turning around to speak with her teammate. What the hell was that back during the battle? Why did you leave the Earth Scroll for them? We'll be able to find another Earth Scroll easily, Kiba, stated Hinata matter-of-factly. There isn't any need to worry about not making the journey within the deadline. We're a scouting team. We can easily conquer this terrain and strike at another team to get their scroll. That's not what I meant. Shouted Kiba incensed. Why the hell did we waste our time helping those others? What was the point if we didn't get the Earth Scroll out of it? Why the hell did you have us go fight them in the first place? You're the leader of this group, but you're acting like those other two teams are more important than us. No, I am not, said Hinata icily. She was offended that he was questioning her leadership capabilities. I simply didn't want our fellow Konoha shinobi from the academy to be murdered so barbarically. That's all. Bullshit. Snarled Kiba, he was losing his patience with her fake answers. All that happened, making us fight those two teams, it was all about that dead last Naruto. Hinata paused and gave Kiba a severe glare. She would remind Kiba not to overstep his boundaries and undermine her authority. Shino remained quiet to watch the drama unfold. He was ordered to keep tabs on Hinata by his father. The Hyuga clan was one of the biggest backers in farmlands used to birth insects for his clan. The Aburam clan were leased those vital property contracts from the Hyuga, who had owned and profited off of them since their settlement within Konoha under the Shodaime. Watch your tongue, said Hinata sharply, don't go around making false accusations out of this masculine sense of jealousy. False accusations? Said Kiba laughing in anger, my clan's chakra sensing allows me to identify people by scent. I was able to smell him on your shirt and lips since we became a team. What the hell do you see in him anyway? Hinata glared hatefully at Kiba. She balled her fists in anger and her palms shook. She wanted to make the stupid mutt shut up. She was well aware that Shino was a spy for the Hyuga elders. Kiba was ruining everything. All her careful planning would become naught. Well, are you going to answer me? Said Kiba. He folded his arms. I think I have a right to know since I'm your teammate and all. Hinata slammed a palm on his folded forearms, the blow blasted him backwards and caused him to slam onto a tree. Akamaru yelped in anger. Hinata swiftly walked over to Kiba, grabbed the collar of his jacket and powerfully hoisted him up in the air. One word, hissed Hinata agitated, her active Byakugan staring at him in revulsion. One more word about that and I'll make sure you and your clan of bitches suffer miserably, understand? Kiba was shocked and angered by this display, but he found that he couldn't break free from Hinata's grip. She had used a paralysis on him without any hand seals. It proved she was leagues above his level. You have no right to know fuck all about my private life, Inuyasaka, said Hinata in anger, and quite frankly, I find it pathetic that you still pine over me when I've made it abundantly clear that I shall not reciprocate those feelings. Find someone else. I tried to be nice, but I'll let you know now. I don't give a shit about you. You are not my friend and you are not my comrade, you are an annoyance. Don't ever speak to me again outside of squad events that we must participate in. She dropped him on his ass, turned around, and marched onward. Shino watched silently as Kiba's facial features slowly went through the emotional patterns of what was commonly labeled as heartbreak. Kiba's tears fell freely once he finished recanting his tale. I don't understand it. Said Kiba. He looked up to his sensei, Kurenai-sensei, how can I show her that I love her? How can I fix this? Kurenai hesitantly sighed as she put a comforting hand on Kiba's right shoulder. She needed him to recognize the truth and move forward. This pining for Hinata had led to a dysfunctional teamwork, a wedge amongst comrades, and she needed to set things straight before something detrimental happened during a serious mission. Kiba, you need to move past these feelings for Hinata, said Kurenai gently. She needed him to understand this. I'll speak to her and have her apologize for her untoward comments about you. However, this desire for Hinata's affections has to stop. She doesn't feel the same way about you, and you can't force her to change how she feels. She and Naruto have been close for 6 years. What? What do you mean? Said Kiba in surprised confusion. Did she tell you that? Why would she? No, Kiba, I know this because I was charged with watching them for their safety, said Kurenai calmly. When I was still I watched over them for almost 6 years. You need to understand that Hinata feels deeply about Naruto and respect her feelings. You knew? Cried Kiba in a stricken tone. He had cut off Kurenai's speech in his anguish. You knew the whole time. You watched them. Kiba, listen. Bit out Kurenai firmly, she needed him to understand and move on. You have to put these feelings behind you. It can be tough, but there are plenty of girls out there, and you can't just keep losing focus on your shinobi training like this to try and win over Hinata. At some point, you need to understand this behavior is unhealthy and find someone who accepts you. Hinata is not that person and you can't force. No. Snapped Kiba frantically, he shook his head as he began backing away from Kurenai with a visage of betrayal. You just don't understand. I'll prove it. Hinata will accept me one day. I have to keep trying. I'll prove that I love her and then she'll see me as worthy of her. I love her and nothing is going to change that. Kiba turned around and ran off. Kurenai yelled at him to stop as a nurse saw him and angrily yelled at him to leave the premises. The hospital was very strict with its no running policy because of the possible emergency shinobi patients they could gain. Kurenai cursed aloud at failing to have handled that better. She hoped that Kiba would learn to let go on his own. If not, the consequences could be dire. She understood that Kiba had felt betrayed once she had come clean about having supervised Hinata's meetings with Naruto as children. Kiba had confided in her about feeling depressed over being rejected by Hinata, spoke of how he always saw Hinata and other women wherever he went, and how he could barely spend time alone without thinking about her. Kurenai had tried to teach Kiba that he was simply idolizing Hinata and not actually seeing the girl's human flaws, but he refused to listen. Now, Kurenai had the more important issue of Hinata's imminent death. Kiba would just have to sort out his feelings on his own. She had already done the best that she could do. She opened the door to Hinata's room, only to have Akamaru jump out and run after Kiba. Kurenai shook her head bemused. Maybe things will work themselves out, thought Kurenai, trying to remain positive. She walked into Hinata's room. I need to keep a strong face for her sake. Oh God, please have mercy on her. Naruto, I hope you find a cure solution soon. Kurenai decided that after this visit, she would go to the closest fire sanctuary in the village to pray for Hinata's well-being. Damn it. Hissed Shikamaru, gritting his teeth in pain, how do I get myself into these situations? He had just stopped Gaara from attempting to kill Rock Lee in the hospital. Unfortunately, he knew that he wouldn't be able to hold Gaara for long without suffering from chakra exhaustion. He couldn't even muster enough willpower to have Gaara move away from Rock Lee. Not to mention the fact that Gaara's sand was still free to strike at him and potentially kill him. I being a fool, Gaara said in a deathly voice, I'm going to kill you, and then I'm going to kill him. All you've accomplished is becoming an unnecessary victim. Why you can't attack the shinobi of another nation? Shouted Shikamaru desperately, especially not in a hospital. That could be considered an act of war. Who will stop me? Countered Gaara, snorting in disdain, you are far too weak to hold this for longer than a minute against me. Gaara wasn't bluffing. He was pointing out the cold hard facts. Shikamaru couldn't hold them for much longer, and they both knew it. Gaara could have simply killed him right there, but had chosen to abstain on a whim. His curiosity was piqued and he wished to observe what his quarry would do. It made the murder that much more fun. Why do you want to kill him so badly? Cried Shikamaru in frustration. He desperately clung to his even as the last of his reserves were drained. Chakra exhaustion would set in soon. He's not even part of a prominent family bloodline. He's just a shinobi with a chakra handicap. It's what I was born to do. Why else? Replied Gaara bluntly. He considered this discourse pointless. It's my sole purpose in life. It's the only reason that people acknowledge my existence. You take your shinobi guidelines too seriously. Yelled Shikamaru. He was forced to let go of his hold on Gaara or else he would die of chakra exhaustion. Shit. You think this is about following a shinobi code? Said Gaara in faint amusement. Shikamaru felt a venomous chakra overtake Gaara's body. Do you know what they are? Shikamaru paled in abject fear. He did know what it was because he had read about them. His eyes widened as he realized what a blunder he had made by deciding to help Rock Lee out of kindness. He needed to get the hell out of here. You will not get away, muttered Gaara darkly. Bits of sand poured from his gourd and started covering the right side of his face in a monstrous mask. The demonic chakra of Shukaku could be felt by anyone in close proximity to the hospital room. I'm not stupid enough to leave witnesses. The sand erupted from Gaara's gourd and launched at Shikamaru in a rush. Shikamaru was too fearful to cry for help as he watched the sand come toward him at a pace too fast for him to escape. Shikamaru closed his eyes. An abrupt boom sound emanated in front of him. Shikamaru reopened his eyes. Uzumaki Naruto stood in front of him. His blue chakra was radiating dangerously. Naruto had used his burst of chakra to blast away Gaara's sand attack. Naruto glared at Gaara in contempt. Gaara gave a menacing gaze right back. The dark eye of Shukaku was visible for them to see. Oh thank God, Shikamaru's words died in his throat once he heard their argument. What the hell do you think you're doing? Snarled Naruto angrily. Chakra exploded from Naruto's body and began radiating a darker blue. Was beating the crap out of him in the preliminary matches not enough? You have to cowardly attack him in a hospital bed too. Cowardice and bravery don't exist in the struggle for survival, said Gaara piercingly. The dark visage of the Shukaku obscured the right side of his face completely. You, being a, should know that is a fact of life. I intend to kill you. Mother has been screaming in my head about eviscerating you when I first saw you protect that child from Kankuro. I shall spill your blood for her to enjoy. You don't have the right to kill innocent people as you please. Rebuked Naruto, he glared at Gaara livid. His dark blue chakra immediately changed to a demonic red hue. The venomous demonic chakra had manifested itself from both. If you want to kill all three of us here. I fucking dare you to take me on first. Naruto closed his eyes and reopened them to reveal the Rinnegan. Gaara's demonic dark eye glared back at the dark purplish eyes of God. Naruto's demonic red chakra flows outward from his body like fire as Gaara's sand starts to swirl in a circular motion in preparation for a fight between demon holders. Why would you risk your own life to protect people that wish to destroy you? Spat Gaara, he gave Naruto a disgusted look. We are created as living weapons of war to perpetuate malady and massacres upon others. We're pawns created to kill anything within our path. That is the sole reason we are created by them, and it is the same excuse they use to discriminate against us. My village placed a demon inside of me for their own self-interests. My father, the Yondaime Kazekage, hoped to use me as a means of gaining better contracts for Tsunagakure or to use me as a means of overthrowing the daimyo since our daimyo outsourced all contracts to other nations. My mother hated the fact that my father used her as a sacrifice to create a monster child like me. As she died, she decried me as born of evil and hoped that I would be her vengeance upon the world that had wronged her by betraying her in an arranged marriage to a self-serving bastard. Shikamaru gazed at Gaara in disgust as Naruto had a mixed visage of anger and sympathy. He knew what it was like. It still didn't give Gaara the right to commit wanton murder. Naruto's red chakra flared. It's the same for you too, isn't it? Don't deny it. We are very much alike. We're living proof that family is just a name given to people that happen to be born out of each other. The sentiment has no real value. We can't strive to make personal lives of our own because we are viewed as sinful beings. People will always hate and fear us. My own family are little more than strangers that I work with. They avoid, hate, and fear me as the rest of my village. Villages create us to do their bidding, shun us when they wish, and attempt to kill us because our mere existence is a problem for them. The irony being that they created us to be efficient mass murderers to begin with. Not even the eyes of God can spare you from such a hypocritical system of judgment. People only want to manipulate us for our powers. Thus, the only reason I have for living is to be a useful mass murderer. It is an expectation that society demands of me. You're right, replied Naruto resolutely. Shikamaru gaped at Naruto in a mixture of fear and shock. We live with the same stigma. Being a psychopathic killer is what society demands of us. But I don't think you're being completely honest with yourself. I remained in my village to prove that I wasn't a monster and that I could be a good person. I know you hate what your village has done to you. So, why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you seek a new purpose in life? Why did you continue to live in such horrible conditions unless you wanted their approval and acceptance just like I do? Approval? Snarled Gaara in revulsion, his dark eye glistened dangerously. Naruto's darker Rinnegan held his glare right back. What a stupid argument. Where would I go? All other of the 5 great villages have either intolerance for Jinchurikis that are equally as bad or are entirely unsecure to live within. My name would have been on the bingo book immediately with a reward out so that Tsunagakure could retain the Shukaku to try for a 4th child to sacrifice into becoming a living monster. There is no way out of this lifestyle decided for us at birth. If there was, then why hasn't such a feat been accomplished beforehand? The truth is that we only exist to embody the devils within us. We have no real choices in life and it is far worse than that of slave labor because many feel sympathy for slaves like Hyuga but none for us. To prove my existence by murdering others is the only freedom I have. Leave, demanded Naruto. He didn't want to acknowledge the truth of Gaara's words. Leave now, I'll fight you during the Chunin exam finals. We'll see which one of us will kill the other there. And the 2 here won't be in jeopardy, thought Naruto. You are an even bigger fool than that weakling. Said Gaara calculatingly, people shall never see as anything more than either as useful killers or psychopathic monsters. Gaara's demonic chakra swirled around him as the sand obscured him in a cocoon before he slowly disappeared from view. Gaara had used the Suna-styled Shunshin no to leave. Naruto closed his eyes to deactivate his Rinnegan. Suddenly, a squad of Anbu appeared at the scene via smoke Shunshin. Naruto turned around to find a long purple-haired Anbu with a sword poised at his throat. He knew that one wrong move would give the Anbu the excuse that she needed to behead him right there. The smoke screen vanished to reveal the other Anbu protectively surrounded Shikamaru and Rock Lee. We heard reports of a vile chakra disturbance in the hospital, spoke the strong feminine voice threateningly, lower your chakra, monster. Naruto closed his eyes and lowered his overflowing demonic red chakra so that it dissipated completely. He slowly made his way to the door. The Anbu tensed on edge as if waiting for Naruto to snap and attack them. Naruto quietly went through the door and left. He didn't glance toward Shikamaru's direction as he made his leave. He didn't wish to give them an excuse to put him in prison. He had chosen instead to leave quickly. Alright, that's enough. He didn't attack. Addressed one of the male Anbu, Shikamaru noticed that he had Anbu captain attire on. Nara Shikamaru, correct? Please come with me. I need a statement about what exactly transpired here. Yugao, take the team back to your original posts outside the hospital. Be sure to monitor the Uzumaki boy in case he acts up again. The Anbu disappeared via Shunshin to do as their captain ordered. Shikamaru was taken to a private Anbu investigation room within the hospital, where he told the Anbu captain, who identified himself as Tenzo Yamato, what he had seen. Yamato had shaken his head at the details and how badly they had misjudged the situation. He had simply made sure Naruto had left the hospital and had him monitored from afar. The other Jinchuriki would need to be watched carefully as well. After Shikamaru was informed that he was free to leave, he trekked back home thinking over what happened at the hospital. Once Shikamaru finally arrived at his house, he searched for his father and found him in the study. It appeared that his father was going through military strategies of some form. Shikamaru made sure to knock before his father beckoned him inside the miniature library. He had seen his father earlier and had been congratulated on making it to the exams. His mother was out grocery shopping to celebrate the event. Shikamaru had gone to the hospital initially to visit Choji and had come by Gaara attempting to kill Rock Lee in the hospital room nearby. Began Shikamaru hesitantly, his father gave him a comforting gaze to urge him to continue with his question. Did you know that Uzumaki Naruto was I happened to find out today? His father stood up straighter and seemed pensive before nodding his affirmative. What happened? Demanded his father firmly. Shikamaru launched into an explanation of what happened at the hospital. Shikaku patiently listened to his son and his face crunched in anger at Shikamaru recounting the tale. His son had been in danger from two Jinchurikis. Why did you ignore him like all the others? Shikamaru had to ask, you're one of the most intelligent people in the village, Dad. You know better than the other villagers. What are you talking about? Said Shikaku annoyed, his son must have suffered from a combination of chakra exhaustion and being near such vile chakra. That boy is nothing more than a war weapon meant to slaughter. A living sin such as that should be locked up like the rabid animal it is to make sure innocent people won't be harmed from its bloodthirsty habits. I've always denounced Hokage-sama's soft-hearted decision to have that thing be given a normal life. Shikamaru nodded at once and told his father that he was going to go to the kitchen to wait for his mother to come home with the groceries. His father bid him leave and told him to keep safely away from the demon spawns and not to discuss this conversation with anyone his age because of the Hokage's unwritten law. Shikamaru affirmed that the Anbu captain had already told him. Shikamaru left his father's study having just learned an invaluable life lesson. Even the most intelligent people in the village like his father, a man known as one of the great geniuses of Konoha for his successful military strategies and a complimentary personal performance record, could harbor horribly ignorant social prejudices like the much less educated villagers. Chapter 9. Radiant Historia. Shikamaru's interlude. When you were young, you wanted to be great. A famous person. A legend. A craving, yearning gnawed inside you. You believed that you had an indomitable will, a sign you were meant for true greatness. The fires of life that were spoken of and celebrated. And then you entered the academy, you did not realize how utterly dull it would be until 3 years in. You were bored by the monotony, the awful teachers, the lame classes, and you felt so exhausted. You just wanted solitude. You cherished your solitude. The world would bow down to your greatness eventually. It was destiny, after all. Your parents kept harassing you about your laziness over and over and over and it became too much. Every time you never got completely perfect scores, when you failed to prove how much better you were than everybody else, when you failed. They would always talk about how you were acting like a delinquent. Comparing you to that friend of your father's who specialized in psychologically evaluating delinquent children. You felt angry, annoyed, and hateful. And blamed only yourself. You wanted out. You contemplated freedom through death more than once. Being free felt better than being a failure. But in your cowardice, you never bestowed death upon yourself. Why am I imperfect? Why am I defective? Why is nothing good enough? One day, you wake up feeling numb. As if you're living as someone else, as if your eyes are just a recorder on constant rewind every school day. Suddenly, everything became a pain. All of it was annoying and difficult. Tests, listening in class, talking to other schoolmates, and then you began questioning God because of the world around you. Culture shock was underestimated. Visiting a palace of people who have their own culture, despite adapting some parts of your religion, was eye-opening. Some of these people believed in a different faith entirely and openly expressed it. Who is right? Who is wrong? Who can say? If one religion is true, then all others are false. You're aware that people know this. But they honestly don't understand the depth of that meaning. They only think of themselves in their own little speckled zone of comfort. It means millions can have true faith in a belief and be utterly wrong. Does violence prove a religion is more wrong than another? Why should it prove anything? Why can't a long-dead religion be the true one? How can we then know right and wrong? You question it. And your questions offend, inciting angry shouts and rants about learning proper respect for others' beliefs. Nothing you say changes others' contempt for mere questioning. But why? You never receive an answer. Just nonsensical self-reverence, patronizing rants, and self-justifications. And suddenly, you question the meaning of life itself. After all, if people unquestionably believe in only one faith and ignore the fact that millions of others believe in a different faith and each side believes the other is wrong, well, don't they realize how stupid that is? What's the point of believing in any of them? No matter what, millions are condemned into ignorance and possibly eternal suffering. You simply receive jeers for openly voicing these concerns. You are being labeled childish, or trying to be cool, or looking for attention. Absolutely no one answers or takes part in answering your doubts. Nobody to rely upon. Like always. Nobody cares about what I really want. You learn to keep it to yourself to maintain the facade that has been growing. You've internalized it all, anyway. Everything feels fake. Nothing in life feels like it truly matters. Why should it then matter that you haven't received any answers? As you graduate from school, you begin to realize the obvious. I'm not special. I was never special. I just don't even care half the time. You don't have the best grades like the boy who is the last of his family, you're no prodigy like the angelic girl who radiates a cold demeanor inculcated by her clan, you have nothing to strive for like the dead last who radiates a calm hope, and you don't see a continued reason for your own existence or any meaning in your own life. And nobody wants to hear it from you. You take it in stride, it's all a part of growing up, right? The adults should know better. They'll teach me what I need to know. But it never happens. Your instructor is decent, but nothing special, your teammates are boring. You find no joy in any of the excursions or activities, and every day you just want to gaze at clouds and forget everything that makes you miserable. You forget your questions, you temporarily forget the gnawing need for something more, for something greater. Hate swells, the gnawing for something more cries out, and you do nothing but stand still, stuck in the same repetitive day for years and years. You don't know what you want or how your life should be and the years are catching up. I thought I was better than them. But you're not. You barely make it out of the forest of death and you're hurting bad. Silently, you think over the contradictions of an exam meant for teamwork only to change to one of personal aptitude without any consistency. How many potentially great shinobi are being denied because they're stuck with cowardly teammates? At first, you believe there is a reason for this beyond your knowledge, then you realize you're using an argument from ignorance similar to religious believers, and then a dawning horror comes to you. All I do is whine, complain, criticize, and get angry. And I'm just too lazy to change. I don't know what to do with myself. I feel like a failure. You never push yourself out of fear of failure, you don't take stress well because you hide your mind in the clouds foolishly thinking that you're looking at the world from a greater perspective and you don't see any point in your life anymore. So you wait and watch and struggle with this yearning that has driven you to utter self-contempt. Why were humans born with desire? What does it accomplish? You never make it past one level in your shinobi career and you stare as a spectator, mystified by the one you thought would be in your shoes. You realize that this gnawing pain will never go away, that you're too lazy to do anything about it and you don't have any real desires because everything feels like a pain. You get angry and frustrated all the time, with everybody, but because you're not loud and obnoxious about it. Nobody notices, nobody cares. Everyone has their own problems. Everyone is out for themselves. Nobody needs me. I don't even matter to myself. You watch, with the same hollow detachment and inner deadness as the dead last awakens the eyes of God himself. And then you realize, as if an epiphany or a revelation. I was never meant to be anything more than a spectator. I'm just average. And I loathe it. And I can never do anything about it. You could never be perfect, you could never face failure, you could never be what you wanted, and you don't even know what you want anymore. Was there ever a point to being me? Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoy it. Turn on that bell notification. Like, subscribe and comment down below. And also check out the other videos I have created and enjoyed it. See you guys next video.